so courts will determine its future. But Texas's bid to lay down its own immigration law is being watched by other states. Meanwhile, the wider Operation Lone Star, which has already blocked federal border agents from patrolling parts of one area, continues. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Charmaine Cozier. The producer was Jill Collins, researcher Matt Tolson, editor Tara McDermott, and technical producer Craig Boardman.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, in today for Marcy Marcusa. And with me are our studio director, Corey Funk, Abby Adiemi, our studio technician, and Heather Wells is in the newsroom with the CBC headlines.
Good morning. Well, a trial for a Winnipeg man charged in the deaths of 4 women in 2022 begins today. Jeremy Skibicki has confessed to the killings, but plans to argue he was not criminally responsible. His trial is expected to include video of a police interview where he confessed to killing the women. So we'll hear more about that. Also, a Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is grateful he has safe refuge. Flooding in that area caused by heavy rain has killed at least 90 people. More than 100 are missing. Thousands more have been displaced. We're going to hear from Luke Zinger, who is hoping the rest of the world will reach out to help Brazil. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Heather Wells in the CBC Manitoba newsroom. Well, here's what's coming up on the show today. The United Nations and other international bodies are putting diplomatic pressure on Israel and Hamas to reach a ceasefire agreement. So is Canada and many other countries. We'll ask a political scientist to explain the situation and what it would take to reach a deal. A new article in the Canadian Medical Association Journal reminds physicians that exercise can be an effective tool for treating depression. We'll talk about that with our house doctor, Raj Bardwaj. A Filipino guitar legend based in Los Angeles recently made a stop in Winnipeg. CBC's Jim Agapito had a quick chat with him about his connections to Manitoba. New preliminary data shows drug-related deaths are surging in our province, so we're going to speak with the director of Sunshine House's mobile overdose prevention site to hear what they say is needed to deal with the ongoing crisis. But first, thanks to generous donors, Manitoba Theatre for Young People has eliminated its debt, and it's not stopping there. We'll hear why the theatre is raising $9 million. Clearing today in Winnipeg, breezy, high 22. Clear tonight, breezy with a low of +5. And then through tomorrow, sunny and warm with a high of 23. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg.
On Q with Tom Power. Toronto's Cooperman brothers are having a moment right now on Broadway. Their choreography for the hit musical The Outsiders, it's up for a Tony this year. They'll tell you how being forced to do martial arts and dance as kids shaped their lives forever.
It was the idea of finding new ways of moving.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. As of today, gay and bisexual men in Canada can donate sperm. Health Canada has updated its requirements, but advocates say even the new rules prevent a lot of people in the community from donating. Health reporter Tashana Reid has the details.
The stigma is fading away slowly.
For decades, Health Canada restricted gay and bisexual men from anonymously donating sperm. Now the regulator says it's adopting a more inclusive approach, replacing screening questions about men who have sex with men with gender-neutral questions about sexual behaviors.
It's a step in the right direction.
Aziz M. is a gay man in Toronto. He filed a lawsuit last year against Health Canada, arguing their donor screening policy is discriminatory against gay and bisexual men. While he welcomes the policy update, he and his lawyer, Gregory Coe, says it's still exclusionary due to a person engages in.
The questions will continue to exclude gay and bisexual men who engage in anal sex.
In a statement to CBC News, Health Canada says its revision was based on available scientific evidence and epidemiological data on the association between HIV and certain high-risk behaviors.
In general, it is a very safe process.
Amish Adalja is an infectious diseases physician at the Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. He says rigorous safety protocols, from quarantining sperm to retesting donors for infections and improved diagnostic testing, ensure all donations are safe.
They are starting to loosen those restrictions based on the state of diagnostic technology. But I do think that there is more room to go.
As for Aziz, he plans to continue his legal fight so more people can help others who are hoping to have a child. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
People in Rafah are cleaning up after a night of Israeli airstrikes. The health ministry in Gaza says at least 4 people were killed when their house was hit. Rida Al-Nalji lives next door.
رسالة العالم يطلعوا إنه يا عمي إحنا أقسم بالله شعب بدنا نعيش مش تابعين مشاكل ولا تابعين.
He says he wants the world to look at what is happening in Rafah. He wants the war to be over. Ceasefire talks are continuing today in Cairo, and the United States top negotiator will personally speak to Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu. The U.S. has paused a shipment of bombs to Israel. It is part of an effort to pressure both Israel and Hamas to agree to a ceasefire. Ukraine's president says Russia has launched a massive nighttime attack on energy facilities across Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky says more than 50 Russian missiles and drones were launched at 7 different regions. Homes were damaged. So was Ukraine's rail network. Russia has repeatedly targeted power plants. It is trying to undermine Ukrainian weapons manufacturing and crush public morale. China's president is in Serbia today. It is the second stop of a brief European tour by Xi Jinping. Xi's visit is 25 years to the day since NATO bombed China's embassy in Belgrade during the Kosovo War. China and the Balkan nation have grown closer in recent years. Freelance journalist Guy Delany has more on the implications of today's visit.
Traditional folk dancers greeted Xi Jinping's arrival in Belgrade. A banquet followed where Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić personally served his country's finest wines. He noted that last year's free trade agreement meant they could be exported to China without facing tariffs, unlike, say, the cognac Xi received in France. This morning, Xi was greeted by another ceremony, but also business. That reflects China's increasing involvement here. It already covers mines, steelworks and home appliance factories, but also infrastructure projects. Chinese finance and engineering are behind the construction of the Belgrade to Budapest railway. Roads, bridges and tunnels are set to follow. Serbia is still negotiating to join the European Union, but the process is interminable, and Xi's visit shows that a different path is possible. Vlada Medjak is from the European movement in Serbia.
The reason why China is present in Serbia so much is because EU didn't get it act together in time. The EU left the vacuum in the Western Balkans. In the Balkans, you cannot have an empty space. Somebody will step in.
Xi Jinping's visit to Serbia may be brief, but the consequences for both countries could be long-lasting. Guy Delaunay for CBC News, Belgrade.
In Hong Kong, this is now banned. It's called Glory to Hong Kong. In 2019, pro-democracy protesters sang that song. Today, an appeals court has granted the Hong Kong government's request to ban it. The judge says the composer intended for the song to be a weapon. He said it's often used in anti-government videos online, and he ruled the ban on the song was necessary to force online platforms to take those videos down. Beijing has been cracking down on freedom of expression in Hong Kong since those huge demonstrations were organized in 2019. 2 national women's organizations are demanding Canadian banks do more to end abusive e-transfers. Their open letter is being published just months after CBC News reported on a case in Northern Ontario. A Sault Ste. Marie woman was murdered by her ex after receiving abusive e-transfers. Katie Nicholson has more.
Dear TD Scotiabank,
Rhiannon Wong with Women's Shelters Canada reads a letter to Canada's biggest banks, demanding they do more to stop abusive e-transfers from being sent to survivors of intimate partner violence. Often, repeated transfers of small sums of money with violent or nasty messages attached. She's frustrated by what she sees as their inaction.
It's either the banks have decided that if they are quiet about the issue, that the issue will just go away, or they've decided that is perfectly acceptable.
The letter urges banks to implement an Australian AI program which blocks abusive messages, or adopt the program Starling Bank in the UK introduced last year.
Swipe up from the app home screen to pull up the transaction feed.
An in-app feature that allows clients to block messages from abusers.
One common form we hear often is that abusive partners open up credit cards in the victim's name, even without their knowledge, and accumulate debt.
Michaela Meyer is with the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, which co-authored the letter. Today, it is also releasing a report outlining a dozen recommendations to better protect IPV survivors.
It is important for banks to understand their financial products and services are not only in a few cases, but systematically being exploited to control and abuse victims.
An understanding they hope will lead to action. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's National Public Alerting System will be running a test today. Alerts will sound out on radio, television, and mobile devices in most provinces and territories. It is all part of Emergency Preparedness Week, and experts say it could be helpful as the country gets ready for possible severe weather in the coming months. The CBC's Julia Wong has the details.
Millions of Canadians will hear this sound on their radio, TV, or cell phones today, as the National Public Alerting System is tested in most provinces and territories. Martin Bélanger is the Director of Public Alerting at Pelmorix.
We want to raise awareness with the public, with Canadians, about the already system, and more importantly, how an emergency alert will sound and look.
The alerts warn about tornadoes, flooding, wildfires, and Amber Alerts. Jack Rozdilski, a disaster and emergency management professor at York University, says this is a reminder for Canadians to be prepared.
Does a person or household have a shelter in place or evacuation plan? Does one have an emergency preparedness kits with supplies?
Over the last few years, the number of alerts has risen dramatically, from 175 in 2021 to nearly 1,100 last year. Martin Bélanger.
There are more authorities that now have access to the already system to send an emergency alert out,
which could be critical heading into late spring or early summer, according to Rozdilski.
When we have a prevalence of natural disasters in Canada related to issues like severe weather and flooding, having general awareness that this tool exists for public alerting is very important.
Don't expect to hear this noise in Ontario today, though. A test in that province will take place May 15th. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. What will it take to reach a ceasefire deal in Gaza? A political scientist will help us understand what steps need to be taken first. How effective are exercise and physical activity at treating symptoms of depression? House Dr. Raj Bhardwaj joins us to talk about that. Unprecedented flooding is displacing thousands in southern Brazil. We'll hear from a former Winnipegger who's been experiencing that displacement firsthand. But first, Manitoba Theatre for Young People was Canada's first theatre made specifically for children, and a new fundraising campaign hopes to keep it thriving in Winnipeg for decades to come. We'll have more on the newly announced Play It Forward campaign coming up on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 6 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, hope and relief for thousands of temporary foreign workers in Manitoba. Ottawa will approve open work permits for newcomers whose post-grad work permits are expiring this year. These international workers have been among thousands applying to Manitoba's provincial nominee program. We are going to hear more about some reaction to this announcement that came yesterday. And today is the second day of a pro-Palestinian protest encampment by students at the University of Manitoba. The U of M says it respects the students' right to express themselves and credits the protest organizers for making sure all participants behave themselves and respect campus policies. So we'll hear more from the university coming up in our next news at 6:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. And joining us now with the first look of the day at the weather is Abby Adeyemi.
I'm really feeling so great this morning because I'm just looking out and I see that clearing and I'm like, it's going to be a beautiful day out there. Our city is experiencing a pleasant 11 degrees. The clouds are clearing. I know we saw that overnight, but they're clearing out, setting a stage for a beautiful day ahead. As you step out this morning, expect the morning to greet you with some clearing in the skies and just keep an eye out for the winds that will be coming from the northeast. It might be a bit breezy this morning. Our high for today is set to reach 22. Now, tonight, the city will be graced with more of some clear skies, offering a serene backdrop for any evening plans you've got. And that wind we're talking about will definitely be tapering off, becoming a light later in the evening, and temperatures will dip down to a comfortable low of 5 degrees. If we look at Brandon's currently clearing up right now at 10 degrees. Up north in Churchill, in Thompson, rather, it is 0, sunny already happening there. Churchill had a freezing drizzle advisory, and that freezing advisory is actually ending this morning. They're currently at -4 degrees. Dauphin is clearing up. It's sunny in Gimli already at 9 degrees. Steinbach is at 10, clearing. Morris at 11. I'll tell you, you need to enjoy the sunshine today. Today brings clearing sky, a bit of breeze from the north. We're going to get to a high of 22. Some clearing in the night and sunscreen. I think that's what would be on the list for today. If you bring your sunscreen.
Pretty nice day across the province.
Across board, yeah.
It's not often we get to say that. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi. And joining us now with a look at the traffic, an early look at what's going on the roads, is Corey Funk.
Yeah, and very quiet so far. Very excited for a little less wind. It's been pretty windy the past few days. It'll be nice to have a little break from that. But if you see something going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. Let me know what you're seeing out there, and I'll let folks know. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Coming up on 6:15, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Manitoba Theatre for Young People just launched the largest fundraising campaign in its 42-year history. Its purpose? To make sure children in Manitoba will always have access to theatre. And it's already close to reaching its goal of $9 million. Pablo Felices Luna is artistic director of MTYP. He spoke yesterday with CBC's Faith Fundal.
$9 million is a lot of money. Why that number specifically?
It is. It's a lot of money, but it all makes sense when you look at the math of it. So I bet you never thought that the artistic director would be uttering the words math of it, but it just happened. So what happened was we looked at what MTYP needed and what we needed to make sure that we're providing these incredible experiences for young people from here into the future. And we identified that we had a $1.5 million legacy debt that we needed to address, and we did that in 2022, so that's taken care of. And then we said our building needs to be updated. It was a state-of-the-art facility, but it's been 25 years. It needs some love. So we looked at everything that needed to happen, including some of our dreams of turning our rehearsal hall into a 100-seat studio theater, Richardson Studio Theater. And that the price tag of that is $6.5 million, which gets us to 8. And then the final $1 million is intended to create an endowment that will provide income for us to create brand new works that reflect the needs, the stories, the dreams of Manitobans. That's a really important piece of the campaign as well, because we need to be able to continue to tell our stories.
Sounds like you have now paid off your student debt, because if the math goes well, that's zero, right?
Yes, that's right. That is taken care of thanks to some great lead donors and some really hard work from the board, staff, and members of our community. That's addressed. So we wanted, by the time we came to this public launch, we wanted to be able to say, that thing, it's taken care of. Don't worry about it. Look at and we have now raised $7.5 million total. So the bulk of the facility upgrades are there, and now we're really looking at how to finish that facility project and also how to support this endowment for the creation of new works.
Pablo, I imagine you don't become an artistic director if you don't love what you're doing. How would you characterize the role that theater played in your own childhood?
I was very lucky. I grew up in Peru, and my parents took us to the theater, took us to the symphony, took us to a lot of different arts activities, and not just sort of what we think of traditional professional arts, but also community arts projects. And I was a theater rat in school, involved in every project I could get into. And it really shaped the way I viewed the world. I also, in my late teens, early 20s, I knew that I really wanted to engage in work that made a difference in the world, that helped us build a better world. And it took me a while, and then I figured that the combination of theater and that sense of that desire to make a change sort of went hand in hand together once you started working for children and young people who are the ones who are going to shape the world. So a huge impact. But I will also tell you, I'm a parent, and I see the impact that theater has had in my kiddos and the amazing human beings that they are, because they've been surrounded by the arts since they were 3 months old and they were in rehearsal halls. And I see it here at MTYP with all the students who come in and day out, and the audiences that come in. So, I could take up the rest of your show just talking about the impact of theater on young people, so let's not do that.
Talk more about what it's like for you as you watch your kids see shows at MTYP.
See, it's fascinating because I started making this work before my wife and I had children, and we had all of these dreams and all of these things that we wanted to do. And we thought we were doing it all. And then once you start watching your own children respond to the work and the experiences that they have, I always tell the story of taking my oldest to see a show that we'd made, Peg and the Yeti, about an adventurous 8-year-old who decides to climb Mount Everest. And on our way home, she made us stop at the park and went into the playground and started climbing the structures and saying, look, I'm Peg climbing Mount Everest, like that sense of imagination, of playfulness, but also like the way they view the world and how they relate to people. They're so great around adults because they can engage in these incredible conversations. They're so in tune with their feelings and their emotions. When we moved to Manitoba, I remember them articulating, the difficulty in how they were processing their feelings about leaving friends behind, but, their hopes for making new friends here in Winnipeg. So all of that, you see it in the way that it's embedded in who they are. And it's who they are. I don't want to take credit away from them, right? But I can't help but feel that living in the arts has made a big difference for them.
You've almost reached your goal. How can folks support the Play It Forward campaign?
Well, we have this great opportunity. PayWorks has come forward as a community partner, and they've offered to do a matching challenge. They've put up to $500,000 in matching money. So if people want to contribute in whatever way they can to ensure the future and the sustainability of this organization and the creation of new works, they can go to our website, mtyp.ca. We are about to roll out our Play It Forward campaign website, which is playitforwardmtyp.ca. And trust me, we'll make it easy if you want to make a donation, a contribution to the campaign. We'll make it as easy as possible. You can also call us at MTYP, and we'll make sure that your gift is cherished and celebrated in the way that it should be.
Pablo Felices Luna is artistic director of Manitoba Theatre for Young People. He was speaking with CBC's Faith Fundal.
They were meant to save you time and save retailers money. But self-checkouts haven't always been the answer. In fact, some stores are getting rid of them. Today on Radio Noon, we want to hear from you. How would you feel if self-checkouts disappeared? Call 204-788-3797 to weigh in now. And then join us for the conversation live at 12:30.
21 minutes after 6 o'clock and 11 degrees right now at the Forks in Winnipeg. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. And Corey Funk joins us now with an update on the traffic.
Yeah, just got a call from Catherine on the commuter line. She says there's a collision right at the corner of St. Anne's and Abinogi-Mikana. And that actually has almost entirely blocked northbound St. Anne's. She says the traffic's already starting to pile up northbound St. Anne's. Southbound is fine, but northbound is rough. And eastbound Abinogi-Mikana as well blocked too. So that may be disrupting your commute this morning. I would love to get more updates from folks about what they're seeing in the area. If it is starting to clear, if there's certain lanes that open up, give me a call. So that's right in St. Anne's and Abinogi-Mikana. Tell me what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
That's our studio director and traffic reporter, Corey Funk. Well, pressure is mounting from the international community to reach a ceasefire deal in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The U.S. halted a shipment of large bombs to Israel in hopes it would help avoid a full-scale invasion in Rafah and allow more time for talks. According to Hamas, a proposed Egypt-Qatari brokered deal was on the table Monday, but Israeli officials said that agreement was far from its, quote, core demands. Instead, its military is moving forward with an attack in southern Gaza, where over 1 million people are sheltering. For more on the latest developments, we've reached Rex Brynan. He's a Middle East expert and a professor of political science at McGill University. Good morning, Rex.
Good morning.
So what can you tell us about the situation in Rafah right now?
As you mentioned, the Israelis have started ground operations east of Rafah, so not in the city proper, but they have seized the Rafah crossing, which is the crossing point between Gaza and Egypt. Whether that is the beginning of a major ground offensive into Rafah proper, or whether that is a bargaining chip, or that's something limited, I think is unclear at this point. There is grave concern about the horrific loss of life that would likely occur were Israel to conduct major ground operations in Rafah properly. But even the seizure of the Rafah crossing has consequences. It's further displaced tens of thousands of Palestinians, and the Rafah crossing was a major route for aid getting into Gaza and a major logistics hub for humanitarian efforts. So it's further hampered humanitarian assistance in the Gaza Strip.
So what does this all mean for a ceasefire?
Well, it's always difficult to know exactly what the ceasefire negotiations are. Hamas accepted a version of the compromise proposal that was put on the table by the Qataris and the Egyptians. That was not accepted by Israel. There appears to be two major sort of categories of sticking point. One is, what is a ceasefire? So the Israeli position has remained, we won't agree to a permanent ceasefire. We want the option to continue the war after a temporary ceasefire. The Hamas position is we want a definitive ceasefire. We want an end to hostilities and the ability of Palestinians to return to their homes, the withdrawal of Israeli forces. And in accepting the deal, Hamas accepted the latter interpretation of the deal. The other issue has been how many Israeli hostages get released when, how many Palestinian prisoners get released when, who are those Palestinian prisoners, and the kinds of the complicated details about a hostage and prisoner release. So those are really been the two sets of things that have been difficult to reach agreement in, and the most important one has been the whole what is a ceasefire issue.
And so what kind of details do we have about the proposed Egypt-Qatar deal that was under negotiation on Monday? Is there more that we know specifically?
So we have some information on that, though we have to be careful because whenever anyone leaks something to the media, they're leaking it to the media for their own purposes. We do seem to have a formula in place on how many hostages will be released when and how many Palestinian prisoners would be released, although there seems to be some difference on who those prisoners are. The really difficult issue has been the ceasefire, or what they're now calling a sustainable calm, to get around the fact that Israel won't agree to a permanent ceasefire. It appears that the Americans are trying to sell Hamas on the idea that even if the agreement doesn't call for a permanent ceasefire, they will put pressure on the Israelis to make sure that a temporary ceasefire is prolonged and becomes permanent. But on the other hand, I don't think Hamas necessarily believes American guarantees, especially since the U.S. doesn't appear to have been able to stop Israel from conducting military operations in Rafah. Another level of complexity in all of this is the domestic politics, particularly the Israeli domestic politics of this. Not clear that Benjamin Netanyahu wants a ceasefire. Were hostilities to end, he then has to sort of face the political music in Israel where he's deeply unpopular. And in some ways, the continuation of the fighting makes it easier for him to postpone his day of political reckoning.
And you touched on the United States. And what's the tone right now coming from the U.S. and other close allies to Israel?
Well, I think the international community has been virtually unanimous in saying there needs to be a ceasefire and there needs to not be an Israeli operation in Rafah, given that there's 1.5 million Palestinians who've already been displaced into the Rafah area, who are struggling to survive in basic shelters and tents with inadequate food and water, that a military operation in the context of that would be disastrous. I think the international community has been very clear on that. The U.S. has made it clear it doesn't want an operation in Rafah. It has even delayed or suspended some arms shipments to Israel. But on the other hand, the U.S. does not appear to have ever really exerted a great deal of effective pressure on Israel. So I think there can be some legitimate doubts about how credible or serious U.S. pressure has been. But the U.S. is saying that it doesn't want a Rafah operation. And I think the U.S. is concerned that the limited Rafah operation we've seen the last couple of days is, in fact, the precursor to a larger Rafah operation. And the Israelis will just keep ramping it up until they're in Rafah City proper.
And in our last minute here, Rex, what else are you going to be watching for in the coming days, given all these circumstances?
Well, really two sets of things. One is, is there agreement on a ceasefire or not? And if there is, does that deal actually work out? Can it be implemented? And second, what happens in Rafah in terms of the Israelis continuing to press westward into the more densely populated areas? On top of that, we have to remember that it's an absolute humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Most of the population has been displaced. Most housing has been destroyed. Most essential infrastructure has been destroyed. Agriculture has been destroyed. 35,000 people dead, a large chunk of those children, and massive famine in particularly northern Gaza. And so what all of this means for the just terrible humanitarian conditions in Gaza.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us this morning, Rex.
You're welcome.
Rex Brynan is a Middle East expert and a professor of political science at McGill University. We reached him this morning in Montreal. It is now 11 degrees, coming up on local news time, just before 6:30 right now. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's 11 degrees. You're going to see the sky clear through the day. You'll even need sunscreen. A little bit of a breeze and a high today of 22. The trial for a Winnipeg man charged in the deaths of 4 women in 2022 begins today. Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers say their client has confessed to the killings and plans to argue he was not criminally responsible. The trial is expected to include video of a 2022 police interview where he confessed to killing the women. The full interrogation lasted about 20 hours. About 7 hours will be shown in court. Jeremy Skibicki is charged in the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unidentified woman given the name Buffalo Woman. A multi-vehicle crash has emergency crews at a busy intersection in South Winnipeg. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison is there as well. Megan?
Yes, well, we have a crash here. I'm at St. Anne's and Abinogi-Mi'kina, and this happened just a little bit before 6 o'clock this morning. We have the traffic is blocked on St. Anne's heading northbound and as well as eastbound in Abinogi-Mi'kina. Now, we have 3 vehicles in the, 2 of them in the intersection, one with the front end completely smashed in. We have debris, part of a fender, and then a wheel that's over by the bus station, and then we have another vehicle that is in the ditch. Now, an ambulance is here. I did see one person walking to the ambulance with a neck brace on. Police are talking with the other people involved, but it could take some time before this intersection is cleaned up. Again, this is Abinogi-Mi'kina and St. Anne's Road, particularly if you are eastbound or northbound. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. A Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is grateful to have safe refuge. Flooding caused by heavy rain has killed at least 90 people. More than 100 are missing, thousands more displaced. Luke Singers lived in the area for about 5 years and right now is staying with a friend.
I definitely was a minor casualty in this, in that, I didn't have to leave under the pressure of the water rising. I just kind of left because I think the expectation is to have no running water and no electricity for days. Some estimates are 7 to 10 days.
Zinger hopes the rest of the world reaches out to help Brazil. He also expects things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. An association advocating for international students and skilled workers in Manitoba is happy Ottawa is going to extend work permits for those whose post-grad permits are going to expire this year. Yesterday's announcement from Immigration Minister Mark Miller means about 6,700 newcomers will be able to call Manitoba home for 2 more years. Yatin Joshi is chair of the International Students and Skilled Workers Union in Manitoba.
A lot of candidates were having that issue and they were frightened. The situation was very terrible. Some of the candidates I personally know were in depression. But when this news came and I saw the post on X by Mr. Miller, I was so thrilled to see that post.
Manitoba's immigration minister says the province will work hard to make sure the newcomers are drawn through Manitoba's provincial nominee program. The second day of a pro-Palestinian protest encampment by students begins at the University of Manitoba. Protesters gathered in a grassy area in the middle of campus known as the Quad. Brandy Usick is Executive Director of Student Engagement and Success at the U of M. She says university respects its students' right to express themselves, and she credits protest organizers for making sure all participants behave themselves and respect campus policies.
We have our security services who are on the ground, and their focus is on ensuring safety for all, for those who are participating in the encampment to ensure that they're safe, but also the broader university community as well.
The protest is expected to continue until 11 tomorrow night. People in Rafah are cleaning up after a night of Israeli airstrikes. The health ministry in Gaza says at least 4 people were killed in one strike that destroyed a home. Meanwhile, ceasefire talks continue in Cairo. At the same time, a senior U.S. negotiator is meeting in Israel with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This as the U.S. announces it's holding back a weapons shipment to Israel. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A veteran Conservative MLA who chose not to run in the last election will make a bid for Heather Stephenson's seat. Shannon Martin served in the legislature for 9 years. He says when the former premier announced her resignation in tuxedo, he had many people urge him to run.
I bring in energy and enthusiasm that I think the residents of Tuxedo are going to want. But more importantly, I mean, my brand of politics has always been center-right. I've always been a pragmatic individual that wants to emphasize the progressive when it comes to progressive conservatives.
Martin doesn't live in Tuxedo, but he's already started door knocking. Family lawyer Lawrence Pinsky and real estate agent Lori Shenkarow, both longtime residents, have been soliciting support from party members. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio here on 89.3 FM, CBC Radio 1. You can also check us out worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, as well as the CBC Listen app and our website. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Time now for a look at the forecast with Abby Adiemi.
Good morning once again. Yes, it's been cloudy overnight, but it's gradually clearing. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at 11 degrees. It's promising to be a beautiful day, a bit of breezy, though, but expect the sunshine to come with some winds from the northeast. We'll be getting to a high of 22 today. Now, tonight, there's going to be clear skies, and then the east winds will be dissipating and giving us a comfortable evening to chill. Heading west to Brandon, it's currently 10 degrees and mostly cloudy. Today we're looking at a clearing sky and a high of 20. Moving north to Thompson, currently at 0, partly cloudy skies we're seeing there. Today you should anticipate a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 16. And now further north in Thompson, further north in Churchill, it is a -4 with mists and a freezing drizzle advisory ended this morning. Then you'll be seeing a mainly cloudy day with dissipating fog patches. We'll see a high of 6. In Dauphin, it is 8 degrees and cloudy. Today we'll see early morning clearing and a high of 20. Gimli is currently sunny and at 9 degrees. Today, the Interlake region will see mostly sunny condition with some breeze to go with it and a high of 18. Steinbach is stuck at 10 degrees and partly cloudy. For the forecast today, we're looking at an early morning clearing and some breezy conditions to go with that, with a high of 22. And finally, in Morris, where it's 11 degrees and cloudy, the Pembina Valley region will be experiencing a clear sky, breezy conditions, and a high of 22. In summary, Winnipeg, we are at 10, shaping up to be a beautiful day, clearing skies, a bit of breeze to go with it, a high of 22. And don't forget the sunscreen, as I mentioned earlier, because of the UV index is on the high side. But tonight, we'll get some clear skies and light winds.
Spring, if you're someone who sunburns, spring is the time you're going to sunburn. So that is good advice, Abby. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adiemi. He's also our studio technician. And our studio director, Corey Funk, joins us now with a look at the roads.
Yes, as we've been hearing the news from Megan, the biggest issue, and it's probably going to be an issue for a good chunk of your morning commute today, is right at the intersection of St. Anne's and Abinogi-Meekina. There's a 3-car collision there. Emergency crews are on scene, and that has northbound St. Anne's and eastbound Abinogi-Meekina entirely blocked right now. So traffic, as you can imagine, is backing up. I heard from Catherine, particularly on the commuter line, that northbound St. Anne's is pretty backed up right now, and that's only going to grow as the commute goes on. So you'll want to avoid that. Southbound St. Anne's, for example, and westbound Abinogi-Meekina seems to be flowing okay. But if you have any updates on that, what you're seeing out there on the roads, or anything else going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Corey Funk. Coming up on 20 minutes before 7 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Well, it's time now for some business news. Phil Demont joins us with the CBC Business Report. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Emily.
So there are increasing reports that the TD Bank is looking to change its top executives, and quickly. What's going on with that?
Yeah, this is all around the growing scandal at the bank regarding its inability to track and prevent illegal money laundering. A year ago, TD pulled out of a $13 billion merger with the First Horizon Bank of Tennessee, and at the time there was some confusion as to why. They didn't really make it clear. It turns out U.S. authorities were looking at the bank's role in a $650 million money laundering and drug trafficking scheme that was going through a couple of the branches for TD south of the border. This week, TD said it would set aside $450 million to cover potential penalties stemming from this investigation. Said, final settlement, we'll have to pay more. The money laundering and drug trafficking took place between 2016 and 2021, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. They filed a criminal complaint on the subject in 2021. In the months and years after that complaint had been filed, TD's head of Canadian banking, personal banking, and general counsel had all left the company. This normally happens, but there was a fair number just leaving fairly quickly. Speculation is now rampant that the CEO, Bharat Maheshwari, might have to go. They were thinking he would go anyway this year because he's been there for a decade, and that's the usual lifespan of a top Canadian banking executive. But now experts say the pressure is likely to build for him to go sooner rather than later, kind of as a bit of a sacrificial lamb to U.S. authorities. But that leaves the bank with two problems: who to replace him with. There aren't a lot of executives left with enough experience to take over the top job, and what to do about American expansion. The settlement, any settlement with U.S. regulators would likely mean restrictions in how the TD could operate in the U.S., and that's a problem because they wanted to have a bigger footprint there. Looks like they may have a smaller one.
And speaking of the U.S., it looks like Americans have used up all the savings they accumulated during the pandemic. Is that similar to what's happening in Canada, or?
No, not at this point, and it's a little unclear why we're more frugal this time around than Americans. In a report released this month, two economists for the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco estimated that in August 2021, U.S. Consumers had accumulated more than $2 trillion in savings, pandemic stuff. By this March, spending had exceeded savings by $72 billion. In other words, Americans were adding to their debt load and their pandemic savings had disappeared. Up here, we have smaller savings now than we did after the pandemic, but situation's nowhere near as dire as in the U.S. We saved something like $350 billion during and immediately after COVID. Economists figure we have about $230 million left in savings accounts and other investments. A couple of guesses as to why. Canada's pandemic help lasted longer than it did in the U.S., so there was more money sloshing around, and restrictions in some American states came off earlier than Canada, so Americans could actually spend their cash sooner than Canadians could. The current economy, the lack of savings in the U.S. might be a big factor behind falling consumer spending in that country. Up here, it's a stagnant economy hurting retailers. Down there, it's kind of non-existent savings.
And now to a completely different matter. What does a Russian hacker have in common with a gang of 1930s mobsters?
Basically, both were criminals for hire for other crooks. This week, Russian national Dmitry Khrushchev was charged by American authorities. His crime is that he ran Lockbit. It's a ransomware for hire group run out of Russia, probably the most prolific in the globe right now, responsible for stealing $500 million in illegal payments and causing $1 billion more in economic damage, mainly in the U.S. The group would lease software to cyber criminals and then use it to attack vulnerable individuals and organizations. Pay up or we'll destroy your computer system, that kind of idea. Lockbit doesn't appear to have directly involved itself in targeting victims. That makes it kind of similar to the famed criminal organization of the 30s known as Murder Incorporated. That was a New York gang that would hire out its members to other gangs. Their job to beat and in some cases kill the people targeted by its clients. In both cases, Lockbit and Murder Incorporated were kind of criminal consultants. The U.S. State Department's offering $10 million as a reward for information leading to Khrushchev's arrest, but he's in Russia right now.
Wow. Okay. So what's happening in the market so far this morning, Phil?
Right now, decent gains in Europe. France up close to 1%. Germany, UK up by less. Weekday, though, in Asia, because of some earnings reports, Nikkei and Japan off more than 1.5%. Hong Kong and Shanghai were underwater as well. Oil down 90 cents, $77.48 a barrel. Gold's down $2, $2,323 an ounce. And the Canadian dollar, it's off about 1/4 cent, trading at 72.71 cents U.S.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Phil DeMont with the CBC Business News. Coming up on 6:45, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg. And you can also catch us worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, as well as the CBC Listen app and our website. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Well, Billie Ann's latest song came to her in a thrift store. The 21-year-old was buying mugs for an apartment she doesn't yet have, and that sent the singer-songwriter off on a mental trip, imagining what life could be. Here's Billie Ann with Daydream.
I was daydreaming in the Sally Inn, glitter glazed mugs fit for grandma's hands for the one day. For the someday we could drink coffee at a rosewood table, cluttered with the trinkets in a brand new Bay and Gable. And we're so stable. Rosy in my head, it's easier to daydream about you. Me at my best, I could fantasize if I have to. Dancing all around the way I daydream about you. Dancing all around the way I'm daydreaming about you. La 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 la. I was fantasizing about some solitude. Carve a little corner higher altitude, little nervous, losing service. You're coming up the driveway through a tunnel of trees, setting up the table by the stream, and it's sweeter than honey, but it's so far from me. Rosy in my head, it's easier to daydream about you. Me at my best, I could fantasize if I have to. Dancing all around the way I daydream about you. Dancing all around the way I'm daydreaming about you. Rosy in my head, it's easier to daydream about you.
Lovely voice and good vibes for the morning. That was Billie Ann with Daydream. It is 6:47 and you're listening to Information Radio. I'm Emily Brass. The World Health Organization says about 5% of adults worldwide suffer from depression. It's one of the most common mental disorders, and now a new article published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal is reminding doctors that physical activity can be an effective treatment for symptoms of depression. House Dr. Raj Bhardwaj spoke about this yesterday with CBC's Corey Funk.
Hi, Corey.
So how effective is exercise at treating depression?
Yeah, in many cases, it can be really effective. There's been research going back for decades with trials of various sizes. Overall, the results consistently show that being more physically active can decrease symptoms of depression, even decreasing the number of suicide attempts in some people. It can be as effective a treatment for depression as talking to a therapist or taking antidepressant medications in some people. So remember, though, that depression and other mental health issues, they're not as easy or simple as a lot of people think. They're complicated problems to tackle. So it's not as simple as mind over matter or, hey, just go for a run to cheer up. That's a huge oversimplification of the problem. I think that it's human nature, though, to look for simple solutions to complex problems. We all do that in so many aspects of our lives, but we just have to be wary of doing that with medical and mental health problems especially.
So how does this work? How would exercise actually change depression symptoms?
Yeah, so it does make sense from a biology point of view, but there's more to learn than we know of so far. So we know that there are measurable short-term effects with exercise, especially intense exercise, that change the levels of different brain chemicals, things like serotonin and norepinephrine. Those chemicals are often the target of antidepressant medications, and they're involved with a lot of things in your brain and your body, including things like regulating your mood. So when we do short-term long-term exercise, people say, they talk about, the endorphin rush, or, feeling so good after they're done. And we can measure that in terms of the chemicals. But when people do long-term exercise training, that doesn't necessarily change the levels of the brain chemicals long-term. So there's more work to be done on the, what exactly is going on from a biochemical or physiologic change that might be happening when people consistently exercise. But even though the biochemical mechanisms behind this, sort of long-term exercise improving mood, they're not fully understood, the results of consistent exercise on mood is measurable, and it has been measured in a lot of experiments and trials. And, apart from the trials over the years that show that there can be a big effect, I've seen it in my patients too. And I think most doctors, most people have actually seen the opposite as well. Examples where a person gets injured, for example, and then they can't exercise as much as they're used to, and they find that, gosh, dealing with stress and mental health issues and stuff becomes a lot harder. For them, it's sort of similar to maybe going off their meds, but their meds are exercise and activity.
Right. I mean, I can attest to some of that. I live with some anxiety and depression myself, and I run a lot. And people are surprised to hear that, when I run it's the closest thing to meditation that I feel. I know for some people do yoga and that stills their mind. I can't do it. I'm not that flexible. but running, for some reason, is what calms my mind. But does it matter, what sorts of exercise or physical activity you're doing?
So it matters in a couple of different ways. The research says that higher intensity exercise seems to have the biggest effect, followed by sort of moderate or lower intensity exercises, followed by more stretching things like yoga. Now that could be different in different people depending on, what sort of, gets them into their zone. Like for you, running gets you into your zone. Other people, for sure, yoga might do that. But in terms of the big trials, we know that the higher the intensity, the bigger the effect. When we talk about intensity, it's going to be different for everyone. But basically, if you can do the exercise and still keep up your end of a conversation, then that's relatively low intensity. If you're breathing harder, though, and you can only speak in short sentences, then you're hitting vigorous activity. And ideally, everyone, all Canadians, should be getting 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity every week. And it's estimated that only about 5% of us are hitting that goal. In terms of the research, there's also a correlation between taking exercise classes, or at least having some supervision, like with a personal trainer. And people who do that tend to have a bigger effect on their mood.
So this is some compelling research. Then why don't more doctors recommend exercise for depression?
Yeah, simple question, complex answers though, right? I'm sure that doctors and therapists do recommend physical activity, but sometimes it's sort of a non-starter with people. People are, especially who are depressed, they tend to have very low energy levels, sometimes are very tired, sometimes even have low motivation to do things. Those are very typical symptoms of depression. So it becomes a sort of a chicken and egg problem, where, we would tell people, look, you'd have more, energy and better motivation levels if you exercised, but people need more energy and better motivation to start doing the exercise. And then, there's other barriers as well. There's the regular barriers everyone has to exercising enough. There's the time and the money and the, juggling things like work and taking care of yourself and doing your chores and taking care of the family and all those other things. There are actually a few exercise prescription programs around the country, not in every province, unfortunately, but there are some, I know, in Alberta and Ontario for sure, where prescribers can give a prescription that you can then redeem for it, like a 10 pass to a gym, or a free month of swim classes or something like that. But we need to expand programs like that. That's called a prescription to get active, and we need to increase that sort of uptake. But even giving people a prescription sort of thing to, go and take a walk in nature, things like that can help. But a specific recommendation, like you need to do 45 minutes of moderate to intense physical activity 3 to 5 times a week, is more useful than saying, you should get more exercise. Right. And the other thing is that last thing, like, people need to buy in. They need to like or at least not hate whatever exercise they're being prescribed. So it really needs to be a team effort here, with the patient leading that part of the team. For example, if you tell me, like you love running, if you tell me that I have to go on a run 3 times a week for an hour each time, I'll tell you that's not happening. Right. I don't enjoy doing that. However, put me on a field with a soccer ball and I'll do that for hours.
Right.
So it's kind of it's interesting because it seems like it's almost the same exercise, but it's totally different in my head.
Mm-hmm. So if people are suffering from mental health issues and want to start using exercise as a treatment, what should they do?
I think the first thing they should do is pat themselves on the back, because wanting to start is a big step, and having that motivation to start is huge. Also talk to a professional, hopefully your family doctor, but also talk to your loved ones, your friends, let them know that you're interested in trying to increase your physical activity, and, see if you want to invite them. You don't have to, but if you want to invite someone to do that with you, remember that doing things in groups or as part of a formal structure like exercise classes often has a bigger effect than doing it alone. The one thing I would warn people is that if you are exercising with others, there's often a pressure to sort of keep up, and that can lead to overdoing it and then an injury. So just be careful about that, and don't feel bad if you need to tap out early or if you need to slow down and rest when others might not. That's okay. But more intense, more regular exercise is better than sort of sitting around and thinking about it. Any physical activity is better than none. So feel free to start slow and ramp up. And if you feel that exercise is helping, that's fantastic. But don't stop or change your medications without talking to whoever prescribed them. And if you are feeling down, please reach out. Family, friends, doctors, therapists, even, the health advice line are good places to start.
That was Dr. Raj Bardwaj speaking with CBC's Corey Funk.
Danse, Anine, Bonjour, and hello. It's me, your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild. Guess what? Unreserved is turning 10. That's like 100 in Res Dog years. And to celebrate, we're inviting you to a live taping of Unreserved, May 22nd at the Park Theatre in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory. Sherry McKay, Doozy, and Unreserved's Auntie Circle will all be there. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community and click on the link to register.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1 in Winnipeg. It's just 3 minutes before 7 o'clock. Time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. A Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is grateful to have safe refuge. Flooding there has killed at least 90 people. More than 100 are missing. Thousands have been displaced. Luke Zinger has lived in that area for about 5 years now, and he's hoping the rest of the world will reach out to help Brazil recover. The second day of a pro-Palestinian protest encampment by students is underway at the University of Manitoba. Brandy Usick at the U of M says the university respects its students' rights to express themselves, and she credits protest organizers for making sure all the participants behave themselves and respect campus policies. We'll hear more from her in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. Quick look at the forecast. Clearing this morning, breezy today with a high of 22 in Winnipeg. Clear tonight, breeze becoming light late in the evening with a low of +5. And for tomorrow, sunny and warm with a high of 23. Corey Funk's here now with a quick look at the roads.
Yes, there's been a collision, a 3-car collision at the intersection of St. Anne's and Abinogi-Mikana, and that has northbound St. Anne's and eastbound Abinogi-Mikana completely blocked. Got a call from Catherine on the commuter line, and that's all causing some big backups, as you can imagine. Last we've heard on the news desk is that police are waiting for tow trucks to come and clear that intersection, so it should be cleared later this morning. When that'll be, we're not sure, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on that. If you see something going on, if you have updates what you're seeing at that intersection or anywhere else, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey. That's CBC's Corey Funk. Well, still to come on Information Radio, his guitar solos are adored by millions of Filipinos around the world. Rock legend Perfecto del Castro recently made a stop in Winnipeg, and CBC's Jim Agapito sat down with the musician for a chat. New preliminary data shows drug-related deaths are surging in our province. We'll speak with the director of Sunshine House's mobile overdose prevention site and hear what they say is needed to deal with the ongoing crisis. All that and more, much more, still to come on Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1.
On The Current.
Things like lying or telling the truth. Am I the for being honest with my partner about what I think about her new haircut?
It is an online forum known as AITA. Am I the, well, you can perhaps guess, where millions of people post their moral dilemmas for the public to give advice on. Now a scholar is using to look at how we make ethical choices on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Immigration Canada still has not hired an ombudsperson to deal with allegations of racism among its staff. It was deemed necessary after racialized staff at the department spoke out about discrimination. Immigration Canada said the office would be up and running by last fall. But as Rafi Boudjikanian tells us, that plan has been indefinitely delayed.
Ottawa in June 2020. Thousands of protesters in the wake of a police officer killing George Floyd, a black man in the U.S. The Prime Minister showed up too. Then departments across the federal public sector began to announce initiatives to combat systemic racism.
The Treasury Board has made this a priority.
Sarji Chima is the National Vice President of the Canada Employment and Immigration Union. It represents some unionized staff at the Federal Immigration Department. She points out employees first suggested the department set up an ombudsperson to deal with workplace discrimination 3 years ago.
It's really hard to be able to work and not feel safe.
Immigration Canada itself documented some of it in workplace reports with comments from employees who were surveyed confidentially. They include complaints about how some staff refer to some African countries as the Dirty 30, or how racialized employees have faced uphill battles getting promoted.
We're going to have this discussion all day long.
The department first promised an ombudsperson office by last fall, then said that would happen sometime this year. It's now indefinitely delayed that. It says it needs to adequately consult before getting up and running, including with existing ombudsperson offices. CBC News reached out to 13 of them. Of the 9 that responded, only 2 said the department has asked them for input, and with 1, that happened more than a year ago. Rafi Boudjikanian on CBC News, Ottawa.
In cases of domestic violence, Montreal police and prosecutors are changing their approach to incidents of strangulation. They're launching a new pilot project. Last year in Quebec, an average of 10 choking cases were reported every week. Sarah Levitt has more.
It's a big indicator of homicide in the future.
It is strangulation by an intimate partner, says Anouk Saint-Onge. She heads the Montreal Police Unit on domestic violence. She's part of a new pilot project that sets out to improve both the medical and legal process for those strangled by their partners. A project put in place due to alarming numbers. In 2023, Quebec's Public Prosecution Office looked into 553 cases involving choking. That's an average of 10 per week. Oftentimes, though, strangling doesn't leave a mark, sometimes making it hard to investigate.
Police officers, investigator, and prosecutor, and even the victim, they all have myth and prejudice about it because they minimize it.
For the next 18 months, social workers, prosecutors, and police will be trained on how to deal with choking cases.
I think personally that it's a wonderful initiative.
Melba Kamateros is the executive director of Shield of Athena. It's an emergency shelter and resource center for women victims of domestic violence.
If it's taken into account early, it might help prevent future violent acts, including femicides. The more we speak about it, the more that we're aware of certain things that occur within conjugal violence settings.
Montreal police will also be adding to the ways they collect proof when meeting a potential victim. Social workers will also be on hand to accompany the person through the process. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
The trial of a man who has admitted to killing 4 women in Winnipeg is expected to begin in front of a judge this morning. Lawyers for Jeremy Skibicki told the court their client should be found not criminally responsible because of a mental disorder. Skibicki is charged in the deaths of Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, and Mercedes Myron, and a 4th unidentified woman Indigenous leaders have named Buffalo Woman. The case will be heard by judge alone. Israel and Hamas are under pressure to make compromises and agree to a ceasefire. The head of the CIA, William Burns, has been leading negotiations in Egypt. Today, he flies to Israel to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And the U.S. is sending a clear message. It wants an end to this destructive 7-month war in Gaza. Our correspondent Chris Brown is tracking developments in Jerusalem.
U.S. officials are pushing an upbeat message about the latest prospects for a ceasefire in Gaza, with White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre saying the gaps between Israel and Hamas can be closed.
It looks like the two sides should be able to come to a deal here.
Hamas appears to have tried to outmaneuver Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu by agreeing on Monday to a proposal to exchange dozens of Israeli hostages for hundreds of Palestinian detainees. But Israel says it never accepted the plan. Israel's military then moved into Rafah and captured the border crossing with Egypt, but at the same time also sent a delegation to negotiate further. U.S. officials say bombs and ammunition to Israel have been held back to emphasize the point that Israel's move into Rafah must stop there. This morning, Israel reopened the nearby Karim Shalom border crossing, which had been closed after an earlier Hamas attack. That may help alleviate immediate concerns about humanitarian supplies reaching Rafah, but Israel's attacks from the air are continuing. This morning, at least 4 people were killed and several children injured when a house in Rafah was totally destroyed. Chris Brown, CBC News, Jerusalem.
German police say a Berlin senator has been attacked by a man in a local library. Franziska Giffey is a former mayor of Berlin. Police say a man hit her on the head with a heavy object. She was briefly in hospital. This is not the first attack against a German politician this month. On Friday, a group of teenagers beat up a member of the European Parliament. The member had been hanging posters for the Social Democrats. Traditional Serbian dancers welcome Chinese leader Xi Jinping to Belgrade. This is the latest stop on the president's European tour. It comes on the 25th anniversary of the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade by NATO forces. In recent years, Serbia has become one of China's closest allies in the Balkans. Xi is meeting with President Aleksandar Vučić. They are expected to discuss China's growing financial footprint in the country. In Hong Kong, this song is now banned. It's called Glory to Hong Kong. In 2019, pro-democracy protesters sang that song a lot. Today, an appeals court has granted the Hong Kong government's request to ban it. The judge says the composer intended for the song to be a weapon. He said it is often used in anti-government videos online, and he ruled the ban on the song was necessary to force online platforms to take those videos down. Beijing has been cracking down on freedom of expression in Hong Kong since those huge demonstrations were organized in 2019. Canada's National Public Alerting System will be running a test today. Alerts will sound on radio, television, and mobile devices in most provinces and territories. It is all part of Emergency Preparedness Week, and experts say it could be helpful as the country gets ready for possible severe weather in the coming months. Julia Wong has the details.
Millions of Canadians will hear this sound on their radio, TV, or cell phones today, as the National Public Alerting System is tested in most provinces and territories. Martin Bélanger is the Director of Public Alerting at Pelmorix.
We want to raise awareness with the public, with Canadians, about the already system, and more importantly, how an emergency alert will sound and look.
The alerts warn about tornadoes, flooding, wildfires, and amber alerts. Jack Rozdilsky, a disaster and emergency management professor at York University, says this is a reminder for Canadians to be prepared.
Does a person or household have a shelter in place or evacuation plan? Does one have an emergency preparedness kits with supplies.
Over the last few years, the number of alerts has risen dramatically, from 175 in 2021 to nearly 1,100 last year. Martin Bélanger.
There are more authorities that now have access to the already system to send an emergency alert out.
Which could be critical heading into late spring or early summer, according to Rozdilsky.
When we have a prevalence of natural disasters in Canada related to issues like severe weather and flooding, having general awareness that this tool exists for public alerting is very important.
Don't expect to hear this noise in Ontario today, though. A test in that province will take place May 15th. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. A Filipino guitar legend based in Los Angeles recently made a stop in Winnipeg. CBC's Jim Agapito had a quick chat with Perfecto de Castro about his connections to Manitoba. According to new preliminary data from the province, 56 Manitobans died in drug-related deaths this past January. We'll hear reaction from Sunshine House coming up. Some horrific details are expected to be revealed during the trial of Jeremy Skibicki, which starts today. He's arguing he is not criminally responsible for killing 4 women. We'll speak with a psychotherapist about vicarious trauma and how you can protect yourself. But first, as unprecedented flooding displaces thousands in southern Brazil, we'll hear from a former Winnipegger experiencing that displacement. Still to come. 11 minutes after 7 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the trial for a Winnipeg man charged in the deaths of 4 women in 2022 begins today. Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers say their client has confessed to the killings and plans to argue he was not criminally responsible. The trial is expected to include video of a police interview where he confessed. So we'll hear more about that coming up. As well, hope and relief for thousands of temporary foreign workers in Manitoba. Ottawa will approve open work permits for newcomers whose post-grad work permits are expiring this year. These international workers have been among thousands applying to Manitoba's provincial nominee program. Yatin Joshi at the International Students and Skilled Workers Union in Manitoba says everyone was very tense and desperate, but now he says they have hope. We'll hear more coming up in our next news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC News Desk. Well, Abby Adiemi's on the other side of the glass. He's our studio technician, but he also has a look at the weather for us.
Good morning once again. Still tracking the weather. The mercury hasn't moved much. We're still stuck at 11 degrees outside, though it's refreshing. The sun is taking the center stage as we start the day. It's promising to be a delightful day ahead. Today in Winnipeg, we anticipate those clouds you saw overnight, and some of them you're still seeing now, disperse, allowing that sunshine to grace us throughout the day. However, you should brace yourself for some, northeast winds. It's going to be kind of breezy day also, so take that into consideration. We're looking at a high of 22 degrees today. As we transition into the evening period, you should be expecting the skies to remain clear, with the winds gradually calming down as the night progresses, and then we'll see the temperature get to a comfortable 5 degrees overnight. Looking ahead to tomorrow, get ready for even more sunshine. It is shaping to be a bright and sunny day for tomorrow. Temperatures will reach a high of 23. If we get to Brandon now, it's partly cloudy. The sun also creeping out. It's 10 degrees there. Thompson is becoming a mix of sun and clouds with fog patches dissipating at 0. Churchill mainly cloudy. That fog patches I talked about earlier is also dissipating at -5. Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, Maurice, all sunny and hovering around 9 and 10 degrees. Expecting lots of sunshine today with some breeze, and the highs would range from 16 to 22. So that's, I'll call it a good day.
I would too. If it wasn't for that wind you mentioned, Abby, I would probably be putting on the shorts today.
Yeah, well, the sun is going to warm things up and then the wind will come. I'll take that, Mish.
Okay, maybe I will then. I'll let you know. If not, I'm going to try tomorrow.
I might just take off my all the shit right now.
Yeah, right. I guess everyone in their own pace. Thank you, Abby. That's CBC's Abby Adiemi. And joining us now with a look at the traffic is Corey Funk.
Also, if it wasn't like minus 1,000 here in our building, I also would be wearing shorts. It's so funny. Shout out to all the office workers out there where summer is the coldest time of year.
Right. It's so true.
When they just blast the AC inside and you're like, ooh.
It's refreshing, Corey.
Yeah, and I got to go outside just to warm up. Yeah.
That's true.
Well, looking out to your commute, the past hour or so, there was a collision at the intersection of Bishop Grand of Abinojimikana, apologies, and St. Anne's, and that now has been cleared. So it should be smooth sailing through the intersection of Abinojimikana and St. Anne's. There was some big backups northbound on St. Anne's and eastbound on Abinojimikana. So there may be some residual slow going there, but you should be able to get through there. So that's the only issue that there was that's now cleared. But if you see something else going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, tell me what you're seeing. Would love to hear from you. That number 204-788-3093.
It's 7:15. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, since this weekend, southern Brazil has been submerged in unprecedented floods. As of today, the floods have claimed more than 90 lives and left over 150,000 people displaced. Former Winnipegger Luke Zinger is one of those people who's been displaced. He spoke with CBC's Gavin Axelrod yesterday.
So Porto Alegre is situated on a large river called Guaíba. It looks like a lake. It's very large. It was raining a lot all last week, and we were hearing about flooding outside of the capital city. In fact, the most affected areas have not been here in Porto Alegre in the capital, but the surrounding area. On Saturday, it started to kind of become real here. I happened to be in downtown. I was helping a friend, and we went to look around, and there was just water in places that you would have never imagine water being there. And it was rising. By Saturday and Sunday, everyone was using WhatsApp and Instagram a lot to try to help people who were stranded. We get a message saying so-and-so is on their roof. That's still ongoing. There are still people being actively rescued. A lot of the efforts right now is getting jet skis and getting boats and the helicopters and petroleum and fuel for all of those things to run. I live a reasonable distance away from the river, maybe about a kilometer, and I was fine. And then Monday morning, I woke up and it was quite shocking. The streets were full of traffic of people trying to leave the city. The mayor of Porto Alegre asked people who have the means to leave the cities. We're about 2 hours away from the Atlantic Ocean, so a lot of people drove to the beach. And some people, wealthier people, have beach houses and they'll go spend time on the beach. And a lot of people left the city. I just left. I'm staying with friends in a part of the city that's far enough away that we're unaffected. We have power and water right now. I just threw as much stuff as I could in a bag. My backpack was overflowing, and I just kind of started walking away, and it was quite surreal. I think that was probably the moment where I was the most panicked, was as I was walking away, and I was just walking down a main thoroughfare here, and it was just bumper to bumper traffic, people trying to leave. People, sirens everywhere, ambulances, fire trucks, people guiding boats, police and motorcycle taking boats to where they could go rescue people. And that was the most stressful part of it for me personally. It's really an unprecedented natural disaster here for this region. It's not like Winnipeg where we get seasonal flooding. They get seasonal rains. It's common to have rains this time of the year, but this level of destruction and just excessive water is completely out of the ordinary. I'm well now, and I'm very lucky to be well. I'm very grateful for the situation that I've been able to put myself. But then it's also strange because there's a lot of children everywhere. I know school in most areas is canceled right now because of the flooding. So it's kind of strange walking through the park and it's like a ghost town, and then there's a bunch of children playing kind of oblivious to this disaster that's happening around them. You imagine apocalyptic scenes, right, with all these helicopters and sirens and everyone's bumper to bumper traffic trying to escape something, and then you see the water just rising, and it was just coming and rising all day, and you see all the parts of the river that are just overflowing. It's really, really tragic here. It's an extremely difficult time because this is the type of the disaster that's kind of just affecting just huge swaths of the population. Like I said, whole areas are destroyed and we have a loss of life. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And it's really hard to think about all of our neighbors here that have lost everything. Obviously, Brazil is not as wealthy as Canada as a country, and it's really hard for a lot of people financially to repair and put everything together when they've just lost their entire home. I think what's going to be really hard here for the people here is that we're having a moment now where this is the start of this disaster, where people are really suffering, and we're having very serious problems with immediate needs like water and food and shelter. And people are doing a really good job getting water and food to people. There's a lot of efforts being made, but the reconstruction efforts just going to be insane. You're going to talk about trying to rebuild whole cities and highways and bridges and complete infrastructure of a region that has millions of people. As someone who's moved here to Brazil, and I really love the people here. I identify with these people, and I really see them as my family and my neighbors, and they're extremely suffering. And I really think Canadians have an opportunity to help. It doesn't take a lot of money to just help out a little bit here, and we're going to need it. And especially as a Winnipegger, we're from a region that experiences flooding. We've all been through floods. We've all helped floods. Many of us have sandbagged. We know what it's like to see our neighbors lose stuff. And if you can imagine that situation just much worse, where your neighbors are losing things and their lives, and it's not just a neighborhood, it's a whole city that's being destroyed. So it's going to be really difficult, and we're going to need a lot of help down here.
What a serious situation. Luke Zinger is a former Winnipegger living in Brazil, and you can read more on this story on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Something strange is happening in Canada. Kleenex is taking a powder. A certain peanut butter is skipping town. And why is the Colonel burying bland fries? Disappearing acts when popular brands are discontinued on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
21 minutes after 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, and worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, as well as the CBC Listen app and our website. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Vancouver artist Chels was raised on a variety of different musical styles, from the jazz she listened to with her grandmother to the musical theater she studied in school. She plays tribute to those musical lineups on this song. This is Chels with Q with Back to You. From Vancouver, that was Chels featuring Q with Back to You. Her new EP 4 is out now, and that's the Roman numeral, like the IV 4. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. And it's time now for some sports news. Scott Regehr joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Scott.
Happy Wednesday for all it entails, Emily.
Yes,
Hump
Hump Day. Yes, looking forward to the weekend already.
Yep.
So looking forward to tonight. It's a big one in men's and women's hockey, isn't it?
Yeah, an historic night, Emily, when it comes to the PWHL, with the league's playoffs getting underway for the very first time. No shortage of storylines. You look at the series between Montreal and Boston, and arguably the greatest two women's players of this generation, Marie-Philippe Poulin and Hilary Knight, going up against each other. Of course, in the past, Emily, they've matched up Poulin and Knight in World Championship finals, Olympic finals, but never have they played against each other in professional playoff action, so this is going to be new. Meantime, Toronto hosts Minnesota this evening after choosing them as their playoff opponents, a unique wrinkle in the PWHL rules. The choice is understandable. Minnesota comes in having lost their last 5 games in a row and did have the furthest distance to travel. Toronto defender and St. Anne, Manitoba native Jocelyn Larocque says this is all going to be a very different experience.
Any championship that I've been a part of for a long time has been one game, like a gold medal game in World Championships, Olympics, NCAA, Clarkson Cup, like they've all been one game. We're here, it can potentially be 10 in 20 some days. So I'm so excited, and I think a series you're just gonna find a real winner, because I think in one game anyone can beat anyone, but it's tough to beat someone 3 times.
The game, which is being played in an arena that sold out in minutes, Emily, airs 6 o'clock Central Time tonight on TSN. Meanwhile, on our website, we have a full PWHL playoff preview, but that's also where you can see the setup for tonight's NHL encounter between the Canucks and Edmonton, Canada's lone remaining teams. They haven't faced off against each other in the postseason, bizarrely enough, in 32 years. Should be a lot of fun.
Wow, how cool. Exciting games tonight. So over to football now, where the CFL has a problem on its hands as training camps get underway today. What's going on with that, Scott?
Yeah, an image problem, Emily. The league suspended its reigning most outstanding player yesterday. Argos quarterback Chad Kelly is going to miss at least the first 9 games of the season after violating the CFL's gender-based violence policy. The CFL came to its decision following a third-party investigation into allegations against Kelly. A former Argos employee has filed a lawsuit claiming that she was fired after rejecting repeated romantic advances by Chad Kelly. The quarterback must now attend mandatory counseling sessions by a gender-based violence expert, after which he will be assessed for compliance. It's not known, Emily, whether Kelly is going to appeal this decision. His agent says he's at least exploring that possibility, but either way, this is not a story the league wants, with rookie camps starting today. And by the way, if you want to check out the Bombers rookies, they will be practicing at Winnipeg Soccer Federation South at 10:30, and as we talked about yesterday a little bit, Milt Stiegel, 50-odd years of age, is going to put on the pads and be part of things for one day, so maybe some added impetus to get down there and check out the blue and gold.
Okay, they better go easy on Milt.
Yeah. Well, he looks pretty healthy to me, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
He can handle it, I'm sure. So finally, it's a massive occasion in footy.
Those who follow the beautiful game, Emily, know that that's the Champions League theme song. Yesterday, Dortmund claimed a spot in the final of the tournament, beating Paris Saint-Germain. Today, we'll know our other finalists, either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. As hosts and the most successful side in Champions League history, Real are the favorites, although Bayern are intent on making it an all-German final. Here's how coach Thomas Tuchel is motivating them.
I simply said, on an evening like this, it's important to reconnect with your inner child, to realize once again that we all wanted to be a part of this when we were little, that we played these games in the garden, and that we should be allowed to be grateful and proud of that.
So that's the pep talk Alphonso Davies received, Emily. Bayern's Canadian defender would probably just like some playing time, though. He was once the best left back in the world, and in the first leg of this semifinal with Real, only played a few minutes, came in as a late sub. So we'll see whether Fonzie fits into the lineup today. 2 o'clock Central kickoff.
Thank you so much, Scott.
You betcha.
The CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's becoming sunny. It's 11 degrees right now. It looks beautiful out there this morning. We're expecting a bit of a northeast breeze and warmer than yesterday. Today's high is 22. The trial for a Winnipeg man charged in the deaths of 4 women in 2022 begins today. Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers plan to argue he was not criminally responsible. His trial is expected to include video of a police interview where he confessed to killing the women. CBC's Caitlin Garlick reports.
Skibicki unexpectedly confessed to killing 4 women during a lengthy police interrogation in 2022. He was being grilled about the death of Rebecca Contois, whose remains had just been discovered. Now, as his trial gets underway in Winnipeg this week, video of that confession is expected to be among the evidence presented. The full interrogation lasted 20 hours, and about 7 hours will be shown in court. Those details were previously under a publication ban because the case was supposed to be heard by a jury, but that changed this week, and the trial will now be decided by a judge. Skibicki is charged in the deaths of Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unidentified woman given the name Mushkade Bishake Ikwe Iban, or Buffalo Woman. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Hope and relief for thousands of temporary foreign workers in Manitoba. Ottawa will approve open work permits for newcomers whose post-grad work permits are expiring this year. These international workers have been among thousands applying to Manitoba's provincial nominee program. That program accepts a limited number of applicants each year. Yatin Joshi is chair of the International Students and Skilled Workers Union in Manitoba.
Everyone was tense and desperate to get themselves drawn, but this ignited hope in everyone's minds and heart.
Manitoba's immigration minister says she expects the permit extension will allow the nominee program to accept nearly all of its applicants. A Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is grateful to have safe refuge. Flooding caused by heavy rain has killed at least 90 people. More than 100 others are missing. Thousands more have been displaced. Luke Zinger has lived in Brazil for about 5 years.
It's just really sad and scary, and it's really hard to think about all of our neighbors here that have lost everything. Obviously, Brazil is not as wealthy as Canada as a country, and it's really hard for a lot of people financially to repair and put everything together when they've just lost their entire home. So it's going to be really difficult, and we're going to need a lot of help down here.
Zinger says he's staying with a friend right now. He left his apartment Monday after the water and power went out. People in Rafah are cleaning up after a night of Israeli airstrikes. The health ministry in Gaza says at least 4 people were killed in one strike that destroyed a home. Meanwhile, ceasefire talks continue in Cairo. At the same time, a senior U.S. negotiator is meeting in Israel with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This as the U.S. announces it is holding back a weapons shipment to Israel. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 8. The University of Manitoba says it is reviewing the demands of pro-Palestinian protesters who have gathered on campus this week. A 3-day encampment began yesterday morning. The list of demands includes divesting from any companies involved in genocide or discrimination against Palestinians. The protesters are also calling for the creation of a new course in Palestinian identity. Brandy Usick is Executive Director of Student Engagement and Success at the U of M. She says a course along those lines is already in the works.
We do promote academic freedom in terms of faculty members choosing what they are going to be teaching and how in which they may teach courses. But my understanding is we do have something on the books already.
The protest is expected to wrap up at 11 o'clock tomorrow night. A former Manitoba MLA is among the candidates lining up to represent the Conservatives in the seat just vacated by former Premier Heather Stephenson. Shannon Martin served in the legislature for 9 years. He opted not to run in last fall's election, but Martin wants to run again now. He's already started door knocking in Tuxedo.
When Heather Stephenson announced her intention to resign, my phone just lit up. I had residents of Tuxedo and just people I know asking me to take a serious look at this, saying, you know what, Shannon, we need your brand of energy, we need your brand of politics here at the legislature.
Martin believes his brand of center-right politics will resonate with voters. Family lawyer Lawrence Pinsky and real estate agent Lori Shenkarow, both longtime Tuxedo residents, have also been soliciting support from party members. Martin does not live in that constituency. Well, times will vary depending on where you live in the country, but a test is being carried out today of the National Public Alerting System. These tests are looking to measure capacity to alert the public about imminent danger like extreme weather. In Manitoba, that alert is going to be broadcast over your cell phone, radios, and TVs at 1:55 this afternoon. Just so you know.
Don't forget.
You can find
when
more
it goes
news
off.
updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah,
You're welcome.
when it goes off, I'm always taken off guard, even though I was warned in advance, and it takes me that second to go, oh, right, it's a test.
It's that sound, hey? It takes you, it does. It's surprising.
It's meant to do that, I guess.
It is an alert.
Thank you so much, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, in today for Marcy Marcusa. Time now for a look at the forecast with Abby Adiemi.
The only alert I can tell you now, which is just for weather, it's 11 outside.
Already.
And those clouds they're gradually making their way for, the clearing skies I talked about earlier. We see the sun already making its appearance. It's going to be a beautiful day. We're looking at high temperature of 12 degrees. I'll call it a perfect day for enjoying the outside. As we transition into the evening period, you should be expecting the skies to remain clear and the winds will gradually calm down as the night progresses. And a sneak peek into tomorrow, more sunshine. It's going to be really, really beautiful. We'll get to a high of 23 degrees. Heading west to Brandon and now, where it's currently 10 degrees. For folks in Brandon, we're looking at clearing skies for you, and you'd see a high of 20. Moving north to Thompson, currently 0. Anticipate a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 16. Further north in Churchill, it is -4 with mist and dissipating fog patches at this moment. Would see a high of 6 degrees for that region. Dauphin is currently at 8 degrees and sunny. Today we anticipate more clear skies for you and a high of 20. Gimli is at 9 degrees and sunny. Today the Interlake region will see a mix of that sunny condition and some breeze with a high of 18. Steinbach is at 10 degrees, partly cloudy at the moment, but the forecast says we're looking for some clearing and for some sunshine to make appearance, and that breezy conditions will also be on the menu. You'd see a high of 22. And finally in Morris, where it's 11 degrees and cloudy, the Pembina Valley region will experience some clear skies, some sunny conditions, some breeze to come with it, and a high of 22. I'll tell you, it's looking beautiful. The clouds are clearing. We're seeing the sun make appearance, and we are comfortable at 11 degrees. We're heading to a high of 22 in the city.
A wonderful day for taking your lunch break outside. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adiemi. And Corey Funk's back in the studio now with me. How's it looking on the roads, Corey?
Yeah, things are back to being pretty smooth. Earlier, there was that collision at the intersection of Abinogi, Mikina, and St. Anne's that has now been cleared, so things should be smooth sailing through there. Otherwise, no calls on the commuter line. Haven't heard anything about any angry potholes out there trying to eat people's tires, but I'm sure there are. And if you see one, you'd like to tell me about it. If you see anything else going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, tell me what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Corey Funk. Well, still to come in this half hour, new preliminary data shows drug-related deaths are surging in our province. We're going to speak with the director of Sunshine House's mobile overdose prevention site to hear what they say is needed to deal with the ongoing crisis. But first, many Filipinos around the world will know our next guest for this. That song is by the Filipino 90s alternative band River Maya, and that guitar solo that you probably heard is played by guitarist Perfecto de Castro. The song boasts over 25 million views on YouTube. River Maya is arguably one of the first bands to spearhead the alternative rock sound in the Philippines during the 90s. De Castro recently visited our province, and CBC's Jim Agapito caught up with him in Grand Point and asked him about his connection to Manitoba.
My name is Perfecto de Castro. Filipinos know me by Perf de Castro, and I'm a guitar player based out of Los Angeles, California. This is actually my third time here.
Your third time in Winnipeg?
Yeah, third time in Winnipeg. First time I visited was touring with Arnel Pineda. That was in 2017. Then 2018, I was here with Intro Voice. We did a show at a community hall somewhere. And then, yeah, and now I'm back.
So for people that obviously might know, Arnel Pineda is the lead singer of Journey.
Mm-hmm.
I told my family, obviously I'm Filipino, that I was gonna speak to you, and they lost their minds. What would people know you for?
If you type Filipino guitarist on Google, my name first comes up.
You do something different with your YouTube channel. You actually want to teach people.
Yes. Hi there. Perfecto de Castro here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having a great day. I've gotten a lot of requests to make a video about learning songs by ear. My YouTube channel is all about guitar. So it's about, learning how to play it, learning how I approach the instrument, learning how to approach tones. Part of it is also like gear demos, showing people, stuff. Because you know how it is when you have a passion, right? You want to show, hey, check this out. This is how it works, and you get to geek out and nerd out on all things that sometimes only you care about. But then the great thing about YouTube is you reach other people who feel the same way that you do, and that fosters a community around, not just the gear, but the instrument itself and the playing and the music. When I first discovered this instrument, I was like 13 years old. I started joining bands back in high school. I initially wanted to be a singer, right? I wanted to be the singer. And we had a band together, and the guitar player was like, I would end up sitting with him and, no, do this. And he goes, why don't you play? Okay, I'm gonna play. So I started taking lessons, and somewhere along the way, I found out that I could make a living just playing the guitar. Prior to that, I was being groomed to become a lawyer.
A lawyer?
Yeah, all my families are lawyers. Like parents, siblings, uncles, grandpa. It became pretty much, as with most passions, it became an obsession.
And that's kind of why I imagine you were brought here by Rev. I mean, Rev is a company from, it's a local company, it's a big company, but you're probably brought here for some of that, How did that happen?
2017, when I first visited Winnipeg, the monitor engineer for the Arnel show asked me, hey, have you tried Rev amps? They're a local company. I've seen them. I haven't played one yet, and then but that put Rev on my radar. Guitar Pusher is the Rev dealer in the Philippines, and they reached out and said, "Oh yeah, I want to connect you with the Rev guys and see what we can do." And from there, I got in touch with Derek. He sent over amps. I used the amps in my videos.
Every color, every hue is represented by me and you. Take a slide in slow. Take a look at the kaleidoscope.
And the thing I like about the Rev guys is they're not stuck up about their stuff. As you can see, like this wall, it's not just Rev, a wall of Rev, because they're also like gear nerds.
Yeah.
they also like good tone. That comes from their amps, but also that comes from other stuff, and it's
this being this very open approach really appeals to me, because I'm the same way. I like everything nice.
That was Filipino guitarist Perfecto de Castro at Rev Guitar Amplifiers in Grand Point, Manitoba. He was speaking with CBC's Jim Agapito. Rev Amps is a local company that makes music equipment for artists like 3 Days Grace, Carrie Underwood, and Rise Against. The song in the background was Perfecto playing Cherry Blossom Sunset, and you can see him play that song live and check out a video version of the story on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel.
They were meant to save you time and save retailers money. But self-checkouts haven't always been the answer. In fact, some stores are getting rid of them. Today on Radio Noon, we want to hear from you. How would you feel if self-checkouts disappeared? Call 204-788-3797 to weigh in now. And then join us for the conversation live at 12:30.
It's 7:46 and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM and 990 AM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. Windsor artist Mike Hargraves just shared his first solo album. It's called Enough Love, and it features this ode to the distinct charms of staying out late. Here's Mike Hargraves with It's a Mood.
I want a late night, and I want to wake up late, 'cause there's a feeling in the hour is reaching 2 or 3, and you get next to me. It's a mood. My heart takes on a color, the light begins to change. It's so beautiful to me. Oh, come on, baby, just stay next to me. I'm not feeling anxious, I'm right where I should be. It's a mood. To somebody that I knew, and it feels like it's been forever since I heard your name. I'm glad you haven't changed. It's a mood. My heart takes on a color, the light begins to change. It's so beautiful to me. Oh, come on, baby, stay next to me. I'm not feeling anxious, I'm right where I should be. And it's a mood.
From Windsor, Ontario, that was Mike Hargraves with It's a Mood, and you can find that track on his new album, Enough Love. Coming up on 10 minutes before 8 o'clock, you're listening to Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1. Quick look at the forecast. Clearing today, breezy with a high of 22. Clear tonight, and that breeze dying down late in the evening with a low of +5. Tomorrow, sunny and lovely with a high of 23. Well, Manitoba is seeing a surge in overdose deaths. 56 people died from drug-related deaths this past January, while in January of 2023, there were 39. This according to new preliminary data from the province. It says 44 of those deaths involved the presence of an opioid. 36 of those deaths also involved fentanyl, and for the first time, it also saw 18 cases of a naloxone-resistant designer drug known as DAG. For Winnipegger Davy Cole, these stats are more than just numbers. They're the director of Sunshine House's mobile overdose prevention site. That's Manitoba's only overdose prevention site, and Cole sees those numbers firsthand. Welcome back to the show, Davy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So what goes through your mind when you hear those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, those numbers aren't just numbers. That's 2 deaths a day almost. That's people, and, when you've been affected by this work for a long time, that hits home. You know the process, that, you look in the city and you can just look out into the crowd and you can see people who've been affected by this drug toxicity crisis, and so when you hear those numbers, it just... it really hits home in a different way.
Yeah, and it sounds like it has an effect on you personally too. Like, how do you keep it up with day in, day out when you see those troubling situations?
It is a crisis. It's called that for a reason. So the folks of us that have been in this work for a long time, there's ways to sustain, and it's through community, and it's through constantly fighting for our people and against the stigma, and there's joy in the work, because what we're ultimately trying to do is just keep people alive, just keep each other alive,
Wow, yeah, what a sense of purpose that is. So how would you describe what you're seeing right now at the mobile clinic?
On the MOP site, it's a very busy site. As you said, it's the first of its kind here in Manitoba. So we're in our second summer, or going into our second summer, and it's extremely busy. It's a very hopping place. But when we see those numbers, we look at what we also have is the data from the city over the first year of having our first mobile overdose prevention site. We had 40,000 plus visits and 0 deaths. Half of those people were actively using on site. So we know that this works. We have the data from our own city. So while it is, it's hard on the heart, to work in this, but it's also, we can see that things are working, and we can see that the community there really wants to take care of each other, and that really sustains the work,
Well, congratulations on those numbers. Why do you think we're seeing this surge right now in drug-related deaths?
It's hard because there's been a lot of, drug busts throughout the country and whatnot. And, while that looks a certain way, those of us working on the streets know that means less access to what people know, or the dealers they know. It means that the regulation or the lack of regulation of toxic drugs really affects the front line, and so we really need to start looking at the drug toxicity crisis as an actual crisis, and start thinking of what are other ways to address of that, because people are going to do drugs. They know the drugs they want to do, and they should be able to have the autonomy to choose that, and not just some random drug that is new designer drug or whatnot,
And that new data also flags the emergence in Manitoba, as you mentioned, of a new designer benzodiazepine known as DAG. What have you been hearing about that drug?
I've been hearing about it from other cities and whatnot. We haven't specifically seen anything we've tested on site, but we hear rumors of it from people and folks. It's really cool with the drug testing that we have set up. The community has really responded to that. And when we hear of things, we start to put out little whispers and be like, hey, if you hear anything, let us know and whatnot. And folks will come and test their supply with this knowledge. And I think that's a really cool thing it's a really cool way to address this,
So that is something you can test for.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Wow. And the latest provincial budget sets aside $2.5 million for a supervised consumption site in Winnipeg, but consultations need to happen first. What's at stake here with that?
I think what's at stake is we need to get moving. Manitoba is historically pretty behind in harm reduction stuff, and we're on our way, and that's exciting. But community is ready. People who've been doing this for a long time are ready. So I'm excited to get this going, and people's lives are at stake. So we got to get moving on the harm reduction in the city.
Mm-hmm. And you wish that the budget was more specific for any of that stuff, or?
I'm excited to hear the specifics on those numbers, and I'm excited to hear more funding coming down the line for these things.
Okay. And how different do you think the number might be, that $2.5 million if harm reduction or safer supply programs were happening already here? Do you think that, like you said, we're a little behind? Do you think that number is going to make up for it?
I think it's a good start, and I think that we need to look at the data that we not only have recently and that will come out of this, and really invest in that, because we have the data from other cities. We're at an exciting time where we have our own data from here, so I think we got to jump on that and work with the system, or work with this the way that works.
Mm-hmm. So, are you feeling any hope at this point with this?
I am feeling hopeful that things are on the move and things are going. And after working for it for a long time, it feels very exciting. But yeah, just got to keep going.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for taking time to join us here today.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me.
Davy Cole is director of Sunshine House's mobile overdose prevention site. And now it is time for the news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. The trial for a Winnipeg man charged in the deaths of 4 women in 2022 begins today. Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers say their client has confessed to the killings and plans to argue he was not criminally responsible. His trial is expected to include video of police interviewing where he confessed to the killings. A Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is calling for people to reach out to help after deadly flooding there. At least 90 people have died, more than 100 are missing, and thousands more have been displaced. Luke Zinger has lived there for about 5 years now. He says some people have lost everything. We're going to hear from him in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's CBC Heather's Wells in our newsroom. Well, still to come on the show, disturbing details are expected to be revealed as the trial of Jeremy Skibicki begins today in Winnipeg. His defense will argue he was not criminally responsible for killing 4 women, and a video confession of Skibicki will be played today in court. We'll hear from a psychotherapist on how court cases like this can affect people following hearing about this story, and we can learn some strategies on how to cope. That's still to come on Information Radio. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. You can check us out on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. And it's going to be a beautiful day. We're going up to a high of 22 right now at the Forks. We are at 11 degrees, a little bit breezy, but still pretty sunny and warm. So make some time to get out there. World Report is coming up next.
On Cue with Tom Power. Toronto's Cooperman brothers are having a moment right now on Broadway. Their choreography for the hit musical The Outsiders, it's up for a Tony this year. They'll tell you how being forced to do martial arts and dance as kids shaped their lives forever.
It was the idea of finding new ways of moving.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It is an online forum known as AITA. Am I the... Well, you can perhaps guess, where millions of people post their moral dilemmas for the public to give advice on. Now a scholar is using to look at how we make ethical choices on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. As of today, gay and bisexual men in Canada can donate sperm. Health Canada has updated its requirements, but advocates say even the new rules prevent a lot of people in the community from donating. Health reporter Tashana Reid has the details.
The stigma is fading away slowly.
For decades, Health Canada restricted gay and bisexual men from anonymously donating sperm. Now the regulator says it's adopting a more inclusive approach, replacing screening questions about men who have sex with men with gender-neutral questions about sexual behaviors.
It's a step in the right direction.
Aziz M. is a gay man in Toronto. He filed a lawsuit last year against Health Canada, arguing their donor screening policy is discriminatory against gay and bisexual men. While he welcomes the policy update, he and his lawyer, Gregory Coe, says it's still exclusionary due to restrictions based on the type of sex a person engages in.
The questions will continue to exclude gay and bisexual men who engage in anal sex.
In a statement to CBC News, Health Canada says its revision was based on available scientific evidence and epidemiological data on the association between HIV and certain high-risk behaviors.
In general, it is a very safe process.
Amish Adalja is an infectious diseases physician at the Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. He says rigorous safety protocols, from quarantining sperm to retesting donors for infections and improved diagnostic testing, ensure all donations are safe.
They are starting to loosen those restrictions based on the state of diagnostic technology, but I do think that there is more room to go.
As for Aziz, he plans to continue his legal fight so more people can help others who are hoping to have a child. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Israel has reopened the Kerem Shalom border crossing today. It is key to getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. Israeli forces have taken over the Rafah border crossing, and they continue their ground assault on the city. The U.S. is now dialing back some of its military support of Israel. Chris Glover is in Washington with the developments.
Protesters shout down police at George Washington University in the U.S. Capitol. Officers moving in this morning to dismantle the entrenched campus protest that's been echoing calls from around the country to divest from Israel's war machine. Just down the street, the White House acting on the growing dissent. As Israel's military continues its incursion in Rafah, it's reportedly doing so with less help from its biggest backer. U.S. officials say a shipment of arms to Israel was held back. The decision reportedly due to American concerns Israel would attack Rafah, something President Biden warned Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu against. This shipment paused last week includes thousands of heavy bombs.
Could have a significant impact.
Retired Colonel Cedric Layton says the bombs have been vital to Israel, destroying Hamas underground.
They've employed 2,000-pound bombs to go after that tunnel network because they have the capacity to destroy those tunnel networks.
Palestinians in Gaza, meantime, now stuck fleeing Rafah, the place many had been told to escape to. While the fighting continues, so does tense negotiating on a hostage release ceasefire deal. The head of the CIA leading the U.S. negotiation team in the region today flies to Israel to meet directly with Netanyahu. Chris Glover, CBC News, Washington.
Ukraine's president says Russia has launched a massive nighttime attack on energy facilities across Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky says more than 50 Russian missiles and drones were launched at 7 different locations. Homes were damaged. So is Ukraine's rail network. Russia has repeatedly targeted power plants. It is trying to undermine Ukrainian weapons manufacturing and crush public morale. China's president is in Serbia today. It is the second stop of a brief European tour by Xi Jinping. Xi's visit is 25 years to the day since NATO bombed China's embassy in Belgrade during the Kosovo War. China and the Balkan nation have grown closer in recent years. Freelance journalist Guy Delaney has more on the implications of today's visit.
Traditional folk dancers greeted Xi Jinping's arrival in Belgrade. A banquet followed, where Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić personally served his country's finest wines. He noted that last year's free trade agreement meant they could be exported to China without facing tariffs, unlike, say, the cognac Xi received in France. This morning, Xi was greeted by another ceremony, but also business. That reflects China's increasing involvement here. It already covers mines, steelworks and home appliance factories, but also infrastructure projects. Chinese finance and engineering are behind the construction of the Belgrade to Budapest railway. Roads, bridges and tunnels are set to follow. Serbia is still negotiating to join the European Union, but the process is interminable, and Xi's visit shows that a different path is possible. Vlada Medjak is from the European movement in Serbia.
The reason why China is present in Serbia so much is because EU didn't get its act together in time. The EU left the vacuum in the Western Balkans. In the Balkans, you cannot have an empty space. Somebody will step in.
Xi Jinping's visit to Serbia may be brief, but the consequences for both countries could be long-lasting. Guy Delaunay for CBC News, Belgrade.
In Hong Kong, this song is now banned. It's called Glory to Hong Kong. In 2019, pro-democracy protesters sang this song a lot. Today, an appeals court has granted the Hong Kong government's request to ban it. The judge says the composer intended for the song to be a weapon. He said it is often used in anti-government videos online, and he ruled the ban on the song was necessary to force online platforms to take those videos down. Beijing has been cracking down on freedom of expression in Hong Kong since those huge demonstrations were organized in 2019. An intense heat wave continues to affect hundreds of millions of people across South and Southeast Asia. Red alerts have been issued for many parts of India, and some states have had to shut down schools. Even the animals are suffering. This man takes care of several cows.
They are in a very pathetic condition. They can't go out. They are not actually ready to graze because of this hot, too much hot. That is unbearable to them. Really, they are not eating anything because of this heat.
Parts of India, the Philippines, and Myanmar have reported temperatures of 43 degrees Celsius and higher in the past few weeks. Officials say the heat wave in many areas will likely get worse in the coming days. Two national women's organizations are demanding Canadian banks do more to end abusive e-transfers. Their open letter is being published just months after CBC News reported on a case in Northern Ontario. A Sault Ste. Marie woman was murdered by her ex after receiving abusive e-transfers. Katie Nicholson has more.
Dear TD Scotiabank,
Rhiannon Wong with Women's Shelters Canada reads a letter to Canada's biggest banks, demanding they do more to stop abusive e-transfers from being sent to survivors of intimate partner violence. Often, repeated transfers of small sums of money with violent or nasty messages attached. She's frustrated by what she sees as their inaction.
It's either the banks have decided that if they are quiet about the issue, that the issue will just go away, or they've decided that is perfectly acceptable.
The letter urges banks to implement an Australian AI program which blocks abusive messages, or adopt the program Starling Bank in the UK introduced last year.
Swipe up from the app home screen to pull up the transaction feed.
An in-app feature that allows clients to block messages from abusers.
One common form we hear often is that abusive partners open up credit cards in the victim's name, even without their knowledge, and accumulate debt.
Michaela Meyer is with the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, which co-authored the letter. Today, it is also releasing a report outlining a dozen recommendations to better protect IPV survivors.
It is important for banks to understand their financial products and services are not only in a few cases, but systematically being exploited to control and abuse victims.
An understanding they hope will lead to action. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in today for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's still to come on the show. Some horrific details are expected to be revealed during the trial of Jeremy Skibicki, which starts today. A video confession by Skibicki will be played today in court, but he's arguing he was not criminally responsible for killing 4 women. We'll speak with a psychotherapist about vicarious trauma and how you can protect yourself from that harm. Meanwhile, a Manitoba and a Saskatchewan MP have teamed up to save plastic straws. We'll hear why, and we'll also hear the reaction of an environmental scientist. We're also going to speak with Laurie Hoogstraten about what's coming up on Radio Noon. All that and more still to come on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, hope and relief for thousands of temporary foreign workers in Manitoba. Ottawa will approve open work permits for newcomers whose post-grad work permits are expiring this year. These international workers have been among thousands applying to Manitoba's provincial nominee program. We're going to hear from the head of the International Student and Skilled Workers Union in Manitoba coming up. And a Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is calling for people to reach out to help after deadly flooding there. At least 90 people have died, more than 100 are missing, and thousands more are displaced. Our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And on the other side of the glass is Abby Adeyemi, our studio technician, who has this forecast for
Did
us.
you see me battling with the blinds? I was
yeah.
because the sun was already glaring and I had to okay, you know what? I need to bring this down now.
Nice, strong sunshine coming
Strong
in.
one there. It's already 12 degrees outside. The sun is taking the center stage and it's going to be a delightful one for us. We're anticipating that the rest of that cloud we're seeing up there to disperse, allowing that sunshine to really grace us throughout the day. However, just remember some winds will be coming from the northeast, so it's going to be kind of breezy one, also coming with that sunshine. And we're looking at a high of 22 degrees today. I'll call it a perfect day for enjoying the outdoors. So you want to, get out there. It's a beautiful day. Now, as we transition into the evening period, we should expect the skies to remain clear and the winds will gradually be coming down as the night progresses. Temperatures will be reaching a comfortable, I'll call 5 degrees. It's kind of cool, okay for the evening with the heat we're experiencing during the day, and then just something to cool it down. Tomorrow we should see more sunshine, and it's going to be beautiful. Brandon is still at 10 degrees. Thompson is going to be seeing a mix of sun and cloud today. Churchill mainly cloudy. That fog patches I talked about earlier, dispersing already, and they are at minus 3 degrees. It's sunny in Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, Morris, all hovering around 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it's a beautiful day, I'll call it. Sunny side of the province.
Yes, everywhere. The sunshine. That's just great news. Thanks so much, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adeyemi. And that sunshine, I wonder if it's creating issues for drivers out on the road. Corey Funk has an update on the traffic.
I haven't heard of anyone yet having to be like, I got to squint. I can't see where I'm going.
Right? That happens to me, though. Like,
It
I got to
is the
put
worst.
that visor down,
Pull the
put on
visor
the
down.
sunglasses.
Yeah, classic move. But yeah, and I haven't heard it causing any accidents or anything yet. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, that stays that way. If you do see something going on, though, if you're walking, biking, driving, tell me what you're seeing, and I'll let folks know what you're seeing out there. 204-788-3093.
"14 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. The trial of Jeremy Skibicki starts today in Winnipeg's Court of King's Bench. His defense is arguing he wasn't criminally responsible for killing 4 women. A video of Skibicki confessing to the killings is scheduled to be played today in court. Laura Kavanagh is a psychotherapist and professor of behavioral sciences at Seneca College in Toronto. She says hearing and reading gruesome details of the case could be traumatic for anyone, whether it's in the courtroom or for someone following the trial in the news. She joins us now to talk about vicarious trauma. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning, Emily. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. Let's just start with, what is vicarious trauma?
Yeah, so, traumatic experience is when we experience an event that's really, really disturbing, that's outside the typical range of human experience generally, and it can have a serious impact on our mental health. But the American Psychiatric Association specifies that experience doesn't actually have to be direct. And indirect trauma, hearing about disturbing events, listening to gruesome details, seeing things that are very disturbing, even if it doesn't happen to you directly, can still have a serious impact on your mental health and well-being. And we call that vicarious trauma.
Right. So who could be affected by vicarious trauma if it's, people who aren't involved?
I mean, anyone could, and I think now, when I was growing up, news was sort of contained, within there was the 6 o'clock news and the 11 o'clock news, and it was all contained within those hours. Now we can seek out details and we have access to information that would have been very difficult for people who weren't reporters or lawyers or police officers to get. And so really anyone can be. And if you have a history of trauma, whether that's personal experience or intergenerational trauma, then the impact of seeing this information and looking at the photos or hearing the disturbing details of the events can really have a serious impact, especially for those who are more vulnerable.
And what kind of role does social media play? And, as you mentioned, consuming all this news and information that could be harmful.
Yeah, our brain wants to gather information, because over evolutionary time, that's what kept us safe. If there's something dangerous out there, the more we know about the predator, the better. But our brain doesn't distinguish well between things that we're reading about versus things that are happening to us, things that happened in the past versus things that are happening now. And so when we're exposed to disturbing details or gruesome facts, like over a regular period, our brain feels like it's in constant danger, and it puts us into this hyper-vigilant, hyper-alert state that's characteristic of the traumatic stress disorders.
And you mentioned, some of the factors that could be triggering, like what might make some people more vulnerable to vicarious trauma than others?
Well, there's just individual differences. Some people are more vulnerable than others just because of their sort of personal neurological wiring. But I know that the victims in this case, all 4 were Indigenous. And this is affecting a community that has a 400-year history of trauma, that is living with the effects of intergenerational trauma. And I know that there's a desire to show solidarity, and even for those of us that aren't a part of the community, that we want to be allies, and that we want to bear witness to this loss and the suffering. But individuals that have been directly impacted, that have that history of intergenerational trauma, are particularly vulnerable. And I think for all of us, it's about finding the balance between being informed, bearing witness, showing solidarity, showing support for others, but also still protecting our mental health, because when we burn ourselves out, when we're really impacted by vicarious trauma, when we're starting to show the signs of secondary traumatic stress, we're actually not really any help to anyone.
What are some of the warning signs that, people might be more affected by this news than they realize?
Yeah, because we don't always make that connection between, okay, what's bothering me, right? And the thing about the traumatic response is it pushes us to the extremes, and it affects all domains of our functioning. So sort of from a physical perspective, someone might be unable to sleep, or they may feel really tired all the time, or they may feel really tired and be unable to sleep. From a cognitive perspective, someone might be hypervigilant, or they may feel like they're in a fog and they have a hard time remembering things. From a psychological psychosocial perspective. Someone may feel either like, for example, like very, very numb, and they feel like they're not really reacting to anything, and I can consume all this stuff and it's not affecting me. Or they may feel really hypersensitive. So it's often like when we're kind of away from that middle ground and we're pushed to the extremes in one direction or another, that it's starting to impact us.
And so what should someone do if they find themselves feeling that stress or experiencing those symptoms you just described?
Well, I think, for our like I said, our brain is not really wired for the 24-hour news cycle. And I think it's important, now that we can access information at any time at our fingertips, to use some kind of self-binding, self-limiting measures. There's a dip in mood after about half an hour of sort of consuming online media, and then a bigger dip after about 2.5 hours. So, think about either, putting timers on those apps or doing something that's really incompatible with it. Because often if you just sort of interrupt that doom scrolling cycle, if you put your phone down, you go for a walk without it, for example, just the interruption kind of turns off the brain's signal telling you more. And then the other thing I would say is that the relief is often in action. When we're consuming information, we think if I get more, I'll feel better, or I'll understand, or something. But it may be actually more of a relief to take some form of action, to feel like you're standing in solidarity or that you're being a good ally. I know that one of the daughters of the victims in this case is raising money to aid the efforts for for the recovery of the victims' remains, where you can make a donation to that. And there's also lots of groups that support missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and you could maybe make a donation to that or do some volunteer work. And sometimes when you take a little bit of action, you feel like, okay, I've done something, and actually that's when our brain stop signal turns off. The stop signal turns itself on, and that signal telling us consume more turns off.
Okay, well, thanks so much for these words of advice.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
Laura Kavanaugh is a registered psychotherapist and a professor of behavioral sciences at Seneca College in Toronto.
There are many people who bring success, innovation, accomplishment, and charity to our community. We'd like you to help us meet some of the best. CBC Future 40 will honor 10 Manitobans under 40 making a difference. Help us discover the inspiring people in our province by nominating a shining star in your community today. For details, visit cbc.ca/future40mb.
22 minutes after 8 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. A Conservative MP from Saskatoon is on a mission to save plastic straws. Corey Tucker has introduced a bill to end the ban on single-use plastics. It's getting the support of his Conservative colleague Brandon Leslie. The MP for the Manitoba constituency of Portage Lisgar released a video to show his support.
Now, it is a bit lazy of me to pick on these alternatives to plastic because they do suck. However, what matters here is whether or not these alternatives are in fact worse for our environment than plastics are. So let's start with everyone's favorite. Paper straws. Straws have one purpose in life. It's to take liquid from my cup and to put it into my mouth. But we all know that paper straws, they don't work so well at that. But the bigger problem is what they in fact are introducing to not only our bodies, but to our environment. A recent scientific study that says polyfluoroalkyl, or PFAS, which is known as a forever chemical, has been found inside plant-based straws in which we are using. The whole idea of these straws is that they are going to biodegrade in our environment and not cause problems. While the straw may break down, this forever chemical is actually leaching into our environment and causing more problems than the plastic straws they're meant to replace. So plastic straws, they were the perfect scapegoat for the virtue signaling left. If we ban these straws, we'll save the tortoises, we'll save the planet, and we'll all be so much happier. It turns out, when you don't look at what the alternatives are going to do and what they're going to be, you have worse environmental outcomes and worse human outcomes too.
That's part of a video released by Conservative MP Brandon Leslie in support of his colleagues' bill to end the ban on single-use plastics. Marcus Brinkman is an associate professor in the University of Saskatchewan School of Environment and Sustainability. He looks at what happens when plastics make their way into the environment and the levels of microplastics draining into local river systems. He spoke with CBC about what stood out to him from the video by the Conservative MPs.
And there's one fact that this video gets right, is that these perfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS chemicals, sometimes also called forever chemicals, are found in paper straws, right? That is certainly concerning because those PFAS compounds can accumulate in humans, they can accumulate in wildlife, they can lead to worse degradability of the paper straws. And once taken up into humans or wildlife, they can have all sorts of health concerns, right? That starts from effects on the immune system to dysregulation of our metabolism, all the way up to cancer, which is certainly concerning. Then there's one point, though, that is not mentioned in the video, and that is that this study, which was conducted in Belgium, also looked at 4 other materials. They looked at not only paper, but also bamboo, plastic, glass, and then also stainless steel straws. And they indeed found PFAS compounds in all materials except for the steel straws, right? So that means regardless of whether you're using plastic or paper straws, you will be exposed to those compounds. PFAS chemicals are really ubiquitous now in the environment, and you find them in almost anything. They're really high production volume and use compounds. So that concern is not isolated to paper straws. A lot of people are frustrated with these paper straws, including myself. I don't particularly love them, but perhaps the takeaway should be that we don't try to replace the plastic straws with paper ones, but to do away with using straws as much as we can, because let's face it, there's other opportunities to replace the straw altogether. You can redesign the lid of your beverage container, which we see in many vendors now for takeout food, or if you go to a restaurant, do you actually need a straw unless you perhaps have a sort of disability that requires you to use a straw, right? So in all of those choices we are making in our everyday lives, I think we can think to ourselves, what are the steps that I could take in order to reduce our impact on the environment?
Maybe you could also BYOSS, bring your own steel straw. Another possibility. Marcus Brinkman is an associate professor at University of Saskatchewan School of Environment and Sustainability. 8:27 right now, and time for some more music. AP Dillon has quickly become not just an ambassador for Punjabi music in Canada, but around the world. His latest collaboration sees him team up with UK hip-hop artist Stormzy. This track's called Problems Over Peace.
AP Dillon, Big Mac. Hey, this is what happens when you mix Punjab royalty with South London's finest.
ਫੈਂਡੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਜੇਬਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਫੀਮ ਨਿਕਲੇ ਤੀਲੀ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਪਿੰਡਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਨਿੱਗੇ ਲੱਗਦੇ ਗੋਡੀ ਚੱਲੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਨਾ ਕੋ ਸਿਰ ਮਜਬੂਰੀ ਥਾਂ ਡੋਡਿਆਂ ਲਈ ਪੱਕਾ 3 ਵੇਗਾਂ ਛੱਡ ਦੇ ਅਹੁਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਕਦੇ ਕੀਤੀ ਨਾ ਵਜ਼ੀਰੀ ਗੱਲ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਨਾਲ ਕਰੀਏ ਜਨਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁੱਟ ਲੱਗੀ ਘੜੀ ਦੇ ਆ ਨੱਗ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੀਨੇ ਆ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁੱਟ ਲੱਗੀ ਘੜੀ ਦੇ ਆ ਨੱਗ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੀਨੇ ਆ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁੱਟ ਲੱਗੀ ਘੜੀ ਦੇ ਆ ਨੱਗ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੀਨੇ ਆ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਚਹਿਰੀਆਂ ਆ ਕੁੜਤੇ ਸਵਾ ਕੇ ਜਾਈਦੇ ਕਚਹਿਰੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਆ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਜਾਈਦੇ ਕਾਲੇ ਕੋਟਾਂ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਪੂਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂ ਯਾਰੀ ਤੇ ਤੇਰੇ ਬਟੇਰੇ ਰੌਂਦਾ ਨਾਲ ਡਾਈ ਦੇ ਕੰਨ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਸੁਣਾ ਜੇ ਕੋ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਨੀਂਦ ਚੱਤੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਉਨੇ ਆ ਜਵਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁੱਟ ਲੱਗੀ ਘੜੀ ਦੇ ਆ ਨੱਗ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੀਨੇ ਆ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁੱਟ ਲੱਗੀ ਘੜੀ ਦੇ ਆ ਨੱਗ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੀਨੇ ਆ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੁੱਟ ਲੱਗੀ ਘੜੀ ਦੇ ਆ ਨੱਗ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਜੀਨੇ ਆ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ
Okay,
Oh, yeah. That was AP Dillon featuring Stormzy with Problems Over Peace. Coming up on local news time, but first we're joined with Lori Hoog-Stratton to give us an idea what to expect on Radio Noon today.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Well, they were meant to save us time and save retailers money, but self-checkouts not really working out like that. A lot of retail outlets are choosing to ditch them. And would you like it? This is what we're going to be talking about on the call-in after the 12:30 news. If self-checkouts went away, or do you like them? So we want questions. We'll be talking to an expert, of course, about that, because some have been closing in Britain and not working so well. And there seems to be a lot of theft involved. And some people just like human contact. And so we want to hear from Noon listeners about how they feel about self-checkouts. How do you feel about them?
I think that's going to be a hot topic. Well, honestly, I have to admit, I tend to go wherever the line is the shortest.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, there's a lot of reasons for and against it. And so I think that's going to be a lot of interesting calls today.
I think so too. We're going to, and in fact, if people would like to call in and leave us a message on our listener line, 204-788-3797, we'd love to get your voices on the air. And of course, we'll be talking live after the 12:30 news.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Lori Hoog-Stratton, who will be filling in today for Janet Stewart on Radio Noon. Time now for the local news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:31, it is 12 degrees in Winnipeg. We're clearing out. We'll see sunshine this afternoon, a breezy high of 22. The trial for a Winnipeg man charged in the deaths of 4 women in 2022 begins today. Jeremy Skibicki's lawyers say their client has confessed to the killings and plan to argue he was not criminally responsible. CBC's Caitlin Garlick reports.
Skibicki unexpectedly confessed to killing 4 women during a lengthy police interrogation in 2022. He was being grilled about the death of Rebecca Contois, whose remains had just been discovered. Now, as his trial gets underway in Winnipeg this week, video of that confession is expected to be among the evidence presented. The full interrogation lasted 20 hours, and about 7 hours will be shown in court. Those details were previously under a publication ban because the case was supposed to be heard by a jury, but that changed this week, and the trial will now be decided by a judge. Skibicki is charged in the deaths of Contois, Mercedes Myron, Morgan Harris, and an unidentified woman given the name Mushkade Bishake Ikwe Iban, or Buffalo Woman. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A new designer drug that is naloxone resistant is claiming lives in Manitoba. In preliminary numbers from the province, 56 people died from drug-related causes across the province in January. That includes 18 cases from the designer drug benzodiazepine known as DAG. Davy Cole is the director of Sunshine House's Mobile Overdose Prevention Site, or MOPS. They say they haven't seen it at their site, but are watching.
The drug testing that we have set up, the community has really responded to that. And when we hear of things, we start to put out little whispers and be like, hey, if you hear anything, let us know and whatnot. And folks will come and test their supply with this knowledge. And I think that's a really cool thing it's a really cool way to address this.
Cole says in the past year, there were no drug-related deaths at the MOPS site. Hope and relief for thousands of temporary foreign workers in Manitoba. Ottawa is going to approve open work permits for newcomers whose post-grad work permits are expiring this year. These international workers have been among thousands applying to Manitoba's provincial nominee program. Yatin Joshi, chair of the International Students and Skilled Workers Union in Manitoba, is relieved.
Everyone was tense and desperate to get themselves drawn, but this ignited hope in everyone's minds and the heart.
Manitoba's immigration minister says she expects the permit extension will allow the nominee program to accept nearly all the applicants. A Winnipegger living in southern Brazil is grateful to have safe refuge. Flooding caused by heavy rain has killed at least 90 people. More than 100 are missing, thousands more displaced. Luke Zinger has lived in the area for about 5 years and right now is staying with a friend.
I definitely was a minor casualty in this, and that, I didn't have to leave under the pressure of the water rising. I just kind of left because I think the expectation is to have no running water and no electricity for days. Some estimates are 7 to 10 days.
Zinger hopes the rest of the world will reach out to help Brazil. A veteran Conservative MLA who chose not to run in the last election will make a bid for Heather Stephenson's seat. Shannon Martin served in the legislature for 9 years. He says when the former premier announced his resignation in tuxedo, he had many people urging him to run.
I bring in energy and enthusiasm that I think the residents of Tuxedo are going to want. But more importantly, I mean, my brand of politics has always been center-right. I've always been a pragmatic individual that wants to emphasize the progressive when it comes to progressive conservatives.
Martin doesn't live in Tuxedo, but he is already knocking on doors there. Family lawyer Lawrence Pinsky and real estate agent Lori Schenkero, both longtime Tuxedo residents, have also been soliciting support from party members. You are going to hear an alarming sound this afternoon. A test is being carried out today of the National Public Alerting System. It comes as coast to coast, federal emergency support officials measure its capacity to alert the public about imminent danger, like in extreme weather. In Manitoba, the alert will be broadcast over your cell phone, radios, and televisions at 1:55 this afternoon. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca, Manitoba.
So don't be alarmed by the alarm, right?
Exactly.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Hope you have a great day. That was Heather Wells from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And now with one last look at the forecast is Abby Adiemi.
I'll tell you, Winnipeg is in for delightful weather today. The sky's clearing and we can see the sun popping out there.
Woo.
We're heading to a high of 22 across the province. The weather's, a kind of mixed match there. Misty and it's dispersing fog in Churchill heading to a high of 6. Mix of sun and clouds and in Thompson heading to a high of 16. Sunny in Brandon and Dauphin heading to a high of 20. Breeze in Gimli, also some sun to come. There's a high of 18. And sunny and breezy for Steinbach and Morris heading to a high of 22.
Thanks so much, Abby.
You're welcome.
That's CBC's Abby Adiemi. He's also our studio technician. And Corey Funk, our studio director, is here with one last look at the roads.
Yeah, you may see some delays northbound St. Mary's. There was a multi-vehicle collision there at Queen Elizabeth and Stradbrook. It has been cleared, but there might be some residual delays, so look out for that. Otherwise, pretty smooth commute overall this morning.
All right. Up next is The Current with that look at that diss between the public beef and dispute between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. More on that. I'm Emily Brass. Thanks so much for tuning in today and keep it locked for The Current. It's a pretty interesting topic. Hope you have a fantastic day.